Welcome to the GreatBase Tennis Podcast. I'm Steve Smith along with Ivan Ozerets.
Hello.
And we're talking to Andy Fitzell. He's already on the line. Andy Fitzell, the guy who started the podcast, the guy who married over his head, the guy who...
I was going to say, it's nice to be on my own podcast again.
The guy who keep going and going, has all the answers. I like the one who's got the face for radio. Yeah, I have to explain that. I have to explain that to some people. Good looking Andy Fitzell. Hey, we're going to talk about Vic Braden. We talk about Vic all the time, and a day goes by, but 10 years ago, October 6th, 2014, Vic passed away.
Yeah.
So in honor of Vic, we thought we would certainly could talk about Vic, but let's talk about basics. I know when you started the podcast out, we covered forehand and backhand and underspin backhand and forehand volley and single strategy and double strategy. And, the 7 people that listen to this podcast told me that I think we've actually got over 10 people listening, haven't we?
Yeah, over 10 for sure.
Over 10. We're big time. We're big time. So but people said they would like to have a circle back and talk about basics. Let me ask you a question. Yeah. You said offline, it'd be great to talk about basics because not many people know basics. What would your comment to that be?
Well, it seems like it's sometimes that fundamentals are confused and lost, and it's more about just drilling and live ball. There's not a whole lot of work where you slow down and really work on fundamentals in a concise way. You don't see that kind of work too often anymore, at least in my experience.
Yeah. How's it go? Happy, busy, good. I mean, static balance is almost non-existent, meaning stationary, you're in one place. And how Vic would feed the ball, you would just feather it. He could do that drill. We recently put something on Instagram with the Vic Braden rapid fire. You can do that to feed the ball very fast in group settings, but you can also just drill the ball that way. But you could just feather it in where it just comes in with a low trajectory, which makes the ball bounce low.
Yeah. Attention spans almost don't allow for it these days.
Yeah. How's it go? Ted Lasso, the goldfish.
The goldfish, exactly.
Attention span. Yeah, these podcasts certainly a different format than 1 minute on Instagram.
I was just going to say with basics, for experienced pros, always just to go back to basics because that's what it's all about in any sport. Anything you're really trying to get proficient at, you've got to just keep mastering basics, working on basics all the time, and then being a lifelong learner. You're always looking at new ways and find ideas to teach those basics. So it's good to revisit the basics.
Let's start with the ready position. I like how you call it the nerdy position. People are too cool for school.
Nerdy position, yeah.
Too cool for school. I was just talking to Adam Bohr, a coach up in New Jersey. He's come to visit a few times. He calls it the Jersey slant. When people are in the ready position, how the racket, it's not centered because they are hanging on the racket with a semi-Western grip, if not further over to Western.
Well, even going to Vic's books, talking about Vic, remembering Vic, the clothes that they're wearing, they have the really high shorts and the really organized ready positions with the hands out in front and the elbows away from the body. It looks pretty nerdy. But it's a good way to remember it.
Vic used to always say, don't use the word natural. People don't just naturally pick the racket up. Sam Snead, the great golfer, used to say, do what's unnatural for 10 years and you'll be a great golfer. I think that applies to tennis as well because almost no one has the ready position. I mean, their hands are not off their body. The elbows are not raised. And anatomically, when the elbow's in, the racket face opens up. If you take your elbow too high, the racket face closes.
Right. I mean, the problem with the nerdy position, the ready position, is that there's a fatigue factor where you muscles, so you can't hang out that way forever. And that's why most people, to be relaxed, that's important. But fundamentally, to to have that ready position like Novak Djokovic does in the ready position on the return of serve is good. And it's great that he does that because, it helps tennis teaching.
Yeah, many times people ask me, who am I cheering for? I said, I'm cheering for the person who will help tennis teaching the most. And I remember,
100%.
I remember years ago, Vilas, the Argentine, he would really get low. His legs would go further and further apart. It looked like a giraffe at a body of water getting a drink. But then the camera goes to the server and he would just jump up in a centered position. As Vic would always say, there's far more similarities and differences from one player to the next. And but yeah, it's not hot and sexy either. Say, well, let's work on the ready position. People just take it for granted. I do think when you go to tennis teaching conferences as well, I've said this for years and years now, that coaches don't talk about basics. They don't talk about fundamental principles in tennis. Yeah. There's certain things that other sports, we talk about it all the time, like basketball, you're going to have a stance at the foul line. Football players have a stance. The sprinter coming out of the blocks have a stance. They have basically a ready position.
Yep.
In watching people play high-level doubles, I know Ivan, we were talking about a field trip. We went to watch the round of 16 men and women at the University of Virginia. And Ivan said he didn't see one player, just taking some notes, making observations, just see one player who had the racket centered. And, it's a pretty safe bet that if you see somebody in the ready position and the racket face has the Adam Bohr jersey slant, that they're not going to be playing a conventional approach volley. They're going to play a swing volley because you basically have to get back to the ready position after every shot. The only shot that doesn't require the ready position is the serve. I'm always asking people, what should you be ready for first? A ball in the air or a ball on the bounce? Off the bounce. And it's amazing. People say, off the bounce. I said, no. The ball has to be in the air to go over the net. And
except for the return. But that's another point with the ready position is for the return serve, if you're going to play at a high level, to be able to turn and just have the strings like a wall so that you can wall to the ball, a short, compact return. But that's where Djokovic, he's got that.
Yeah, I mean, you can get people's attention. Look, but it's interesting that many kids, they don't talk about attention span. They don't watch tennis. And then if they do, especially the boys, they're looking at YouTube highlight reels.
Yeah.
They're not looking for basics. And then with their YouTube research and how they're interpreting it, not good.
Yeah. Well, Vic used to talk about the ready position. People would love to talk about the ready position because it was a position they felt like they could master pretty easily. It's like, okay, I can get this down, the ready position. But nowadays, there's still a lot of confusion around how the ready position should be.
My crack at humor, I used to say, that's the only thing that people agree upon is the ready position. Years ago, should you take the racket straight back? Should you take the racket? Should it be a loop? And now I think most conversations just zero in on the forehand. But just taking the few minutes in the beginning of practice, end of practice, having kids practice in front of the mirror. There's other ways to say ready position too. I think that's where we get back to neutral, center the racket, preparation.
Yeah, organized. Yeah.
Yeah, Dennis Vandermeer used to always say, organize your feet, organize your hands. I do think when there's an emphasis on the split step, the organizational step, and not only should you organize your feet, you need to organize your hands, and you need to do it quick.
Yeah.
You need to do it quick.
Well, and the nice part, if you really can have a ready position that's centered, then you've got the interrelationship of strokes and spins where then, okay, I can just leave the racket alone and turn the body to have the forehand volley, to have the forehand ground stroke, return a serve, without having to make independent arm movements or racket movements.
That's a powerful line in the language of tennis teaching. And that's basically what we tell people GreatBase is a language. The interrelationship of strokes, the interrelationship of spins. So when you're up at the net, Yeah, the ready position. The ready position basically is the forehand volley, and from that you make a unit turn, and you're set for not only a volley, you're set for so many other shots.
Yep. So that, efficiency, if you have that, then you can be efficient. If you're off on the ready position and you turn, then you have to make an extra movement with the racket or the arm. So it's not efficient.
How about the feet? A little more than shoulder width apart, knees flexed. What would you say about lower body with ready position?
Yeah, well, the center of gravity will come up, for the split step. And then, as you land, then you're pre-stretching the calf muscles.
When people do split step, say, for example, a right-handed player, passing shot's going to their right side, so it's going to their forehand volley. So that when they do split, in that situation, that the right foot is veered off to the right. So they have that ground reaction force to push off.
Going to Braden, I think one thing that he always emphasized with the ready position is at the net is that that's not where you're going to volley from. It's a split step, and then you're not going to volley from there. You're going to go to the forehand or the backhand. You're going to move forward on a diagonal. Yeah. So it's really just a quick moment where you pre-stretch and then you go.
The Vic language, driver lob.
Driver lob. It's a drive.
Analyze to anticipate. So you have to read the racket, read their body position. And Vic used to say, there's not too many disguises where they're going to fake it. There might be a fake poach in doubles and such, but so watching the racket. How about the ready position? What's your comment on where people are standing today? I mean, I think of watching, like, say, a Medvedev. Love to listen to his interviews. Just so honest. Fun guy to listen to. But I have my thoughts on what Uncle Vic would say about the players being so far back. What comes to your mind?
Well, a couple things. Medvedev, number one, he resets the swing on both sides. So he goes low, high, low, high. So that takes time. So if it takes time, you've got to buy time. How do you buy time? You scoot back. So that's one thing. The players are buying time. Obviously, the faster the ball's coming nowadays with the serve. But then if a player is not able to serve and volley, there's no threat. So you can just hang on back there and try to get the ball deep centered, and you're into the point. So if you can neutralize off of somebody's first serve, that's awesome,
With being so far back, exactly. People are not, for the most part, they're not serving, volleying. The reset swing, that's where you think about Roger Federer being so close in comparison to one of his contemporaries, Andy Roddick. But exactly, if they have a complicated backswing that takes more time, they go further back. I mean, Bjorn Borg, he had a reset on the backhand side, and McEnroe came along and he could really hit the slice serve out wide in the ad court. And that was one thing where Jimmy Connors had a leg up on so many people because he stood in so close.
Yep.
Then the history of players where, Connors off the wooden floor hitting against a backboard, East St. Louis during the winters, just being able to take that ball early.
Yeah. And another point is just why that's important to understand grips, to understand swing patterns, because once you recognize those inefficiencies or those areas that could be a hole in somebody's game, then you can come up with a strategy and then implement it when people know that.
Ivan, you probably would know what major it was. I think it was 17 out of 18 times. Djokovic, who's not really a natural instinctive serve and volleyer, he served wide in the deuce court to Medvedev, righty to righty, and he came in, and some people call it the can opener. He opened the court up, came in, and just knocked off one volley. Yeah. Was that US Open?
My first instinct is the Aussie Open last year.
Okay.
Could be wrong, but that's what I think it is.
Because they say certainly the further back you have, you give your opponent more angle, and they have more time to actually come in. That's where Kyrgios was throwing in the drop shot because players are so far back.
And for the player that is back, the further they go back, the smaller the angle becomes.
Right.
The dimensions of the court. So, now you've got to really make sure you keep the ball within the sidelines because the angle is actually smaller. Yeah,
singles is 19.1 from the sideline going cross court, the angle, and doubles is 24.2. I mean, that's a Braden language. I mean, if you're having a conversation with someone and they don't know the dimensions of the court, they certainly don't know Braden information. We simply call it tennis math.
I think if you go to Vic's books, the first thing he'll talk about is the realities of the court. The tennis court is not gigantic. You got to be 6'7" just to see over the net and see any part of the opposite baseline. So you're constantly looking at your target through the net. So the optical problems that creates, but that's the first thing he goes into is, okay, this is here are the realities of the court. To understand that, and then that helps you understand your swing path when it comes to hitting forehands and backhands.
I think waiting with a forehand grip, we tell people in the ready position, we'll get into grips, but with just ready position, a beginner have the grip on 3, someone, a 7-year-old, for example, have their palm be completely behind the racket. No such thing, another Bradenism, no such thing as a perfect grip, just a grip with least amount of adjustment. So from the service line in to have almost a continental grip. Another Bradenism, pros don't say what they do or do what they say. They really cannot articulate, intellectualize how they hit the ball for the most part. But with going back to return serve, so many players today have a two-handed backhand. So the left hand is in a fixed position. It's always on the third panel. It's always on an Eastern. And then you would just change 3 things when you turn from the service line back. When you go to hit a backhand, as you turn your shoulders, you change your grip and straighten your arms. Vic would just say, push both palms down, going with the 8 bevels, 1/8 of a turn. It's like a chest pass in basketball, just fast hands. So it's not a matter of just changing your grip. You got to change the position of your arm. Your arm's going to be in a bent position when you turn for a forehand. And ideally, one-handed or two-handed, your arm's going to be not hyperextended, but relatively straight when you make that unit turn.
Yeah.
The grip determines the angle of the racket face. So when people are in the ready position, it's amazing that you really can tell. You're looking at your opponent from 78 feet away. You should just know how they're hanging on the racket based on the angle of the racket face.
Yeah, the grip, it dictates the position of the wrist really as well, especially on forehands, where the Western is so far underneath and contorts the arm. How much you have to adjust the wrist is also dictated by the grip. You don't want to have, like you said, the least amount of adjustment. That goes with the grip, but also goes with the swing, with the forearm, with the wrist. You're either going to adjust your grip or you're going to adjust your wrist.
Yeah, we're always telling people, Bud Collins, one of Vic's contemporaries, the broadcaster, journalist, great for the game, historian, he used to say it's an Hawaiian grip. The history of the grips, from California, the West Coast. It's interesting.
Even more west.
Yeah, Hawaii is way out there. But with that, 1 year at the National 12s, this was, Vic passed away 10 years ago. This was more than 10 years ago. But it's still relevant, just like all of Vic's work, is that we filmed 50 boys, 50 girls, incognito, filmed from behind. Mm-hmm. And it's not just that they had 90% of the players had very, very close to an extreme grip, if not all the way on Western. But it was, like you said, it was the wrist position being underneath, the elbow pointing down. And it was almost like the butt of the racket was hitting their earlobe.
Yeah, because of their height.
Yeah, and the contact point, that's something that people don't really understand, getting into basics. It all ties in, grip, swing body. I don't think many players, obviously over the years, watched so many college tennis matches. One of the big differences between a college player and a touring pro is the contact point. so many kids, they don't know. They're now 18, 19, 20. They're playing college tennis, and they're still hitting the ball at the same contact point that they had in the 12s.
Yeah. Shoulder height above the shoulder.
Yeah, then when you
trying to change direction.
When you do that, you have when you have a higher contact point, you have a shorter hitting zone. The tracking motion, or the racket goes out to the court.
Yep.
Yvonne, what else on the ready position?
Ready position? I don't know. I always think about Coco Gauff, and I think the ready position is just, players see that and they think, well, she does it, so why can't I do it? She won the U.S. Open. That's good enough for me. And I always, think back to what you say to that, Steve, where, you always look for the 1%. Don't you want to get 1% better? If this is better and you understand why it's better, why not just do it? Just go for it. And a lot of players don't have that mentality where they hear good information, things that make sense to them, and they want to accept it. They just see what they want to be, someone like a Coco Gauff, and she's doing it. Okay, I'm doing it. And I'm guilty of that. I mean, I was a huge Roger Federer fan, and I tried copying everything, and I wasn't smart enough to check what he did in 2005 and 6 and 7, how his swing looked like, and even before then when he was younger, how he was taught, long shadows, long follow throughs on balance, and I just I consider myself smart in some cases. Some people would say I might be dumb in others, but I didn't think of that. It's like, why don't I just look at how the person I idol hit the ball at the age I'm at right now? And it would have made a big difference. And it's a tough connection to make as a tennis player, where you're trying to achieve something and you're looking at it as a model. But logically, you should be thinking, okay, basics, fundamentals, how to hit the ball. Like we've mentioned before, the basics don't come naturally. It's not something that you can intuit. It's like, well, this is how the swing should be made. Should be the ready position here. This is what I feel. Oftentimes, it's not how it works, and it's tough to accept. Most people, when they do accept it, it's a relief. And if it's a bit later in their life, like myself, you get a bit angry at yourself that you were so stubborn. But accepting the information, understanding the math behind it. Once you do that, you have a greater lens, a larger lens. You're not so stuck in your own mindset, and you could see past all these myths that that have been taught to me personally, that I accepted just blindly and not really questioned. So that's one thing. It's just basics. Circling back, not many people understand the basics of tennis because they're not really taught.
One thing with Coco Gauff, she just won another big tournament. And she's won the U.S. Open. I was fortunate enough to watch her play from the time she was 10. I remember being at the Orange Bowl, where she won the Orange Bowl. It was interesting that year. She played the Eddie Her 18s and the Orange Bowl 12s. But yeah, she's teaching us when it comes to mental toughness. She's teaching us when it comes to fitness and work ethic. And I think one thing to her credit, in comparison to juniors, from the service line in, she's much better off than she is from the service line back. And, Andy, for our listeners, we've been a lot of places together. And I remember being in South Florida, and we were at a place where a gentleman had 5 squash courts and 1 indoor tennis court. And she was in there with a couple of Patrick Mortigulu, a couple of his staff members, and they were helping her with fitness in this small boutique gym. But her little brother was hitting balls. And for Coco, it's a whole different deal. The teacher, the little brother, when he gets at that time, he might have been 8 years old. But his Agassi said one time about Andy Roddick taking the racket low on the backhand side. He said to the commentator, his co-host, he said, well, the horse has been out of the barn a long time. Mm-hmm. But Coco, she's going to make $50 million this year. So I think that the game would be okay for her to take time off, take serious time off, and make that change. I'm always telling people, I think I could take a lawnmower apart, but I don't think I could be able to put it back together that easily.
Vic would say you can make anything work, with enough repetition. But going back to another principle would be injury prevention. is to be as efficient as you can so that you can prevent injury. So least amount of moving parts, least amount of muscular effort. So there's some things with Coco's serve. She can hit it really hard. She's a superior athlete. But to make it better and to be, preventing injury down the line.
I certainly listen to my share of podcasts. I mean, not listening to politics, not listening to humor, history. There's just so many things. But with Andy Roddick on the serve, at one time he said, well, I just hit it. I don't really know how I hit it. And now it talks about the legs and talks about he's based in Charlotte and how Brad Gilbert flew into Charlotte with Coco Gauff, worked on her serve. And sometimes, the more you talk, the less you know. And that, are you really a technician? But she does struggle on her serve. I think that'd be a much easier fix. The body can't be going left and can't be going in two directions or counterproductive. You can't be going left. You can't be bending at the waist. But yeah, let's go stroke by stroke instead of starting about grips next, because let's just go with forehand volleys. It's quite difficult for, say, if a junior is highly motivated, it's quite difficult for them to look at film of pros volleying, unless they were to go way back. They would look at matches from yesteryear with what comes to your mind with Bradenisms and his contributions to tennis when you think of the forehand volley?
Well, starting with the ready position, the elbow being away from the body, elbow being raised, that helps to keep the racket face vertical. So if the elbow is in, which a lot of people are taught in the ready position or on the volley, keep your elbow in. Anatomically, it lays the racket face back. And so now you have to time the ball on an arc or have a downward swing. So just the idea of the ready position, the elbow away. He used to joke around and say, that's not a very comfortable position unless you hang out at a bar all day with your elbows up on the bar.
That's why the Aussies were so good. The Aussies were so good. They're always drinking mother's milk. They're always drinking the beer, have the elbows on the bar back in the 50s and 60s. Right. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
So that would be the first thing. And then if you can do that, then you just make a unit turn. You make a wall. You're just trying to have the racket face vertical, in line with the incoming ball, and then take it out to your outgoing target. Like other, basics on the volley, moving through the volley, that will help keep the racket head up. It's a source of power. It'll help you get to the net faster if you're moving forward, where you can play the ball when it's higher and closer to the net, where you have more angle. That always makes me think of that story when Richard Hernandez did the podcast and talked about that time with Louis Caillé, that he was in a group of coaches where Louis Caillé was doing some double stuff, and Louis talked about moving through the volley like it was this new revelation, and Richard rose his hand and said, "Hey, wait a minute, Vic Braden, 1977, tennis for the future. Let's not reinvent the wheel. That's already been known." And he just I think Louis just kind of said, "Well, good for Vic Braden." But that kind of research where you'd have people stop and volley, and the racket and body would go down when you stop abruptly. So moving through the volley, and if you hit down 2 degrees from halfway between the service line and the net, 10.5 feet, the ball can go in the net. So just those little things, understanding, okay, that makes sense. I'm going to try to move through my volley. I'm going to try to keep my racket face level, have a long hitting zone, right? You want to have strokes that are good under pressure, and if your timing is off, you're still going to be good. That's the whole point of a follow through. Just in case your timing is too early, then you're still going to be good.
With something that you set me straight on, because for years and years, there actually was more instruction years ago. We certainly lacked information, but you could go from one instructor to the next, and it was much better than it is today. So there was a ready position, there was a unit turn, there was a backswing, there was a contact, there was a follow through. But I would say that so many players has had a death grip. They'd be hanging onto a continental grip, base knuckle, your heel pad, base knuckle of your index finger and your heel pad, those two reference points forming a line. They'd be on the second panel, so a right-hander, one panel to the right, which opens the racket space 45-degree angle. But you set me straight on that, because really that's changed. Today, it's like people are volleying with a composite on the forehand volley, and unfortunately, a composite on the backhand volley. When you come
same grip.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the racket face is open. Composite grip, forehand continental, or Eastern forehand continental in between. And then, some players are making that change or heel pad change from forehand volley to backhand volley, but most of them, I would say, are pushing the wrist out if they hit flat, which you could do if you're strong enough. Again, injury prevention, you got to be careful. But then most of the guys, you're going to see more of a downward swing path on the backhand volley. So coaching the passing shot, it's like just hit topspin to the backhand side, because number one, your eyes, when you're trying to track the ball hitting with topspin, the movement of the eye, the saccade of the eye is difficult to judge a topspin ball when it's coming down. And then number two, the racket face is going high to low. So, they're not going to be as accurate because the hitting zone isn't there. And then underspin floats. So a lot of times you get these volleys that will just sit up. So just to get the ball dipping low to the backhand side on the volley is a really good play with the way most people are volleying these days, in professional tennis at the highest level. You
look at like Nadal, and I've heard McEnroe say in not too many years gone by that the best volleyer in tennis. But it's similar to Borg. Borg had a big layback on the backhand volley, but by the time Borg, just like Nadal, had really pushed his opponent back, got him way off the court, they just had to calculate the angle of the racket face or the angle of the racket path. But Vic,
Nadal was on an Eastern forehand grip.
Yeah,
and he chokes up on it, and then on the backhand side there's definite high to low, but he's very close to the net, so he can just dink it into the treasure, middle of the service box, and he's fine.
Well, I think it's what Yvonne said too. That's where young players coming up can be defensive. Change is difficult, and then I find it troublesome where young juniors, they're looking at the pros and go, well, so and so does this and so does that. A Bradenism on the backhand volley, we can get to that, but knuckle guidance, but palm guidance. So goes the palm, so goes the forehand, so goes the forehand volley, so goes the forehand ground stroke. I know for Jim Klein, who's been a guest, we need to ask Ryan Reedy to be on. And he's a big following with 2 Minute Tennis, does a very good job giving out technical information. Mm-hmm. And I was asked one time to critique, Jim asked me to critique something that he had, of a short video. And he was just being emphatic that you don't want to volley the continental grip. But, Vic, he was calling himself Fat Albert long before Bill Cosby was. But, Fat Albert, you can hit it with any grip you want. It's how's the racket face at the hit, the moment of truth, that 3 to 6 millisecond hit. On
the forehand side, you could hit with a continental. You just got to play it late, or you got to contort your wrist, especially if you're going to try to hit it straight ahead.
Yeah, and that's where, obviously players get to the point where they're serving with a continental grip and they're coming forward. It's very unfortunate if kids are doing that at a really young age. That's they're just, there has to be an understanding of stage development. Where you're teaching a 7-8-year-old, they're going to be much stronger when they're 17 or 18. But I think to come back to the power sources, the speed of the incoming ball and the movement forward, we do a drill where, we've worked together for so many years now. Okay, get a partner, toss a ball, 8 to be great. Both players run up and back, and they look like Pete Sampras coming in, just, moving through the volley, keeping the racket like it's going across an ironing board, a tabletop, a linear pattern. But then juniors don't make the understanding that they could just hit one volley deep, singles or doubles, or they could just make one volley. Why don't you comment on the continental grip and why so many players finesse volleys?
Well, with the open racket face, that's one thing. If your racket face is open, you got to swing down. And so it's just racket alignment. That's probably the biggest issue with the continental grip. The racket face is tilted up and to the left 45 degrees. So unless you're, adjusting your wrist to hit it flat, you got to play down. And so that's where, sometimes you have to take the spin off of the ball. You want to be able to do everything, but fundamentally, you want to try to have a flatter volley so that, number one, you avoid the net. Number two, you have a hitting zone. Number three, you're ready for the next shot, with the racket head up.
Yeah. Well, also too is that if you don't drive the first volley, there's a very good chance that the next ball is coming through your chest. So, I remember years ago being up in New York with the late Tommy Fye, who worked for Vic back when I did, and we're watching Ashley Weinhold, whose parents, they went through this program we had called Tennis Tech, and they were with us for 5 years. And their daughter became a very good junior. She was ranked 1 in the U.S. And so I remember Sam Query, who I think ended up being 6'6", and he was probably making, $20,000 a week at one point. Very, very successful. Not sure if he quite cracked the top 10, but I always thought that he was a very relaxed competitor, and certainly he stepped up the line, had that huge serve.
Yeah.
But I just remember saying to Tommy, I said, what's the difference between these two? And it was interesting. Elliot Telscher was running the session because, and he spent so many years with Lansdorf, but he was out of that Vic Braden culture from the Kramer Club. And I said, watch this kid Query, like 14 years old, 15. I said, he's going to finesse every volley. So now he has a very popular podcast, and it's just interesting. Self-deprecating. He goes, he just beats up on himself. Yeah, I couldn't volley. I had no volley. Yeah. But the curiosity, like say Roddick, I just remember watching Roddick practice, and my volley sucks. But they don't know why. It's amazing.
Well, and that's the danger is for young players coming up who are looking at their heroes and they see them, especially when they're just warming up. It's very casual, practice at the net. Also, they don't understand that the force of the impact against the racket, especially on the backhand side, will throw the racket down. But they'll watch the way they're volleying and that's what I want to do. That looks cool. That's what my hero is doing. But what they need to realize is those guys aren't coming to the net. Like, those guys don't come to the net to stick volleys when they're playing matches. Ever. I had heard Tommy Paul's fitness trainer has been here in Malibu working with the team, and he was just saying, they would watch, Tim Henman and Boris Becker and Edberg and Rafter. They're just watching old tapes of how those guys played, because those are the guys that could really volley.
Yeah. No, Federer was asked when Edberg was working with him, "You going to come to the net like Stefan used to?" He goes, "I would, but I don't volley as well as he does." And it just comes down to calculation. Yeah. One of the guys I trained was directing the Roddick Tennis Academy, and then with a group of people, they purchased it. I believe late Mr. Roddick was Jerry Roddick, and a good friend of mine passed away, Bobby Curtis. Used to hang out with Bobby all the time, and he would tell a story where Gilbert, he wanted $1 million a year. This is after Roddick had won like 23 matches in a row, won the U.S. Open. He was the hottest guy in tennis, hottest player on the men's side, and he's being wanting $1 million a year. But he goes, "Yeah, but we got to find somebody to teach Andy how to volley." And as great as Query and Roddick served, it wasn't like, and of course tennis has gone the way where players really specialize now, but it wasn't like in a pinch they were going to ask them to play Davis Cup doubles. But I remember Mark Woodford made the mistake as well. Sampras doesn't play doubles anymore. So Sampras hadn't played doubles in a long time, and actually many different ties. But I remember it was in Moscow where they had Pete play the doubles in the middle day, because if you can volley, you can volley. Look at Wawrinka and Federer. When they won Olympic gold, Nadal won it, but Nadal, he'd be the first one to say. He did say, biggest fluke in tennis. He won the gold medal in doubles. I think language, I would give, for my homework, I would give Peter Burwash the credit for, racket head awareness. Years ago, we would have kids go play, all right, let's see you play a set of tennis and just hang on the racket with one grip. Years ago, we don't ever do this now. We say, okay, just play a set and just hit forehands only. So that's what they do now anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go with,
Did we cover everything in forehand volley?
Yeah, I was going to say,
ready position turn, make a wall, step and swing together, bodies at a 45 at the point of contact, make contact off the left shoulder and eye level.
Synchronization, step and swing.
Keep your arm bent, swing from the shoulder, move through the volley.
The trick question, do you swing and step or step and swing? But ideally you want to do it. That's where ideally you're going to take a number of small little steps. Vandermeer did the did the footwork with no step, one step, side step, step underneath. I think at Chet Murphy on the forehand volley, getting away from basics, I remember people laughing at Chet Murphy and I go, he's right. Talking about a drag volley, a snap volley,
right?
A curled volley, a reflex volley, and you have to do all of that. But I think that many times people get the cart ahead of the horse. You got to get things in order. We always say if you're going to go buy some yogurt, go to the yogurt shop, get the bowl first.
Yeah, get the fundamental, and then you can improvise off of that.
Don't put the sprinkles in the palm of your hand and put the yogurt in your hand. Get a bowl. Just.
Yep.
I just think another word for basics too. I mean, just fundamentals. With when you hear things, people say, "Well, the parameters." That's just too liberal. That's just like, okay, we'll let this go and let that go, and then also teaching the kid to be an independent thinker, problem solver.
Major theme, Vic Braden theme.
Yeah, low volley, high volley. What are your comments?
Yeah, low volley, low to high. So you've got to get the racket down low first, where again, you'll see most players coming in high to low and having to calculate that. But if you can just set the racket basically at a 90-degree angle to the oncoming angle of the ball, and then you just follow it right back on the angle it came down on. Most of the time, it's no more than 10 degrees open. Same thing, trying to move through it, approach volley, swing from the shoulder, or lift from the shoulder. You're not hitting topspin, you're hitting with a vertical racket, but that way. And then on the high volley, from the service line from about a 4-foot height, you can hit 70 miles an hour flat. The ball will stay in. From the halfway mark, you can hit it 50 miles per hour, and the ball will stay in. So you can really deck that thing flat. The continental grip on a higher forehand volley, the way the racket is beveled, the butt cap's going to lead a little more. So that's where it's not as stable with a continental grip on a high volley either.
Mark Hamlin.
But still, swinging from a shoulder, unless you're on top of the net, you're not really trying to hit down. You're just trying to go level. Mark
Hamlin, who you know well, worked for Braden. Yep. We were way back together, and he was talking about being able to drive a volley 70 miles an hour. He goes, yeah, but your racket's off by 2 or 3 degrees, you'll hit the fence. I like to tell people, just think of these two words, face and path. And what happens is over time, the brain has made an adjustment, but it's made the wrong adjustment. So what people do is they don't change the face, they change the path. And then they're just hacking away. I mean, they're like looking like a lumberjack up there. And then they don't go. They just don't go to the net because the calculation of their volleys is so poor. And, it's just tragic. We always talk about people playing one up, one back doubles. I mean, it's just, instruction is, tennis needs a shot in the arm with higher quality of instruction.
That reminds me of when David Wheaton reached out to Vic about his volleys landing short, and Vic basically explained to David exactly what I just said about how hard you can hit it flat and have it stay in and go deep. And he's like, I don't know about that. And so he went out to the tennis college and tested it out. That's the whole thing, is all this stuff can be proven, because it's just physics. And that's the nice part about it. It's not opinion. It's not subjective. It's like, here it is, this is it. And so he did that, and it was like, whoa, okay, yeah, that works. And then he also changed his toss and started serving faster as well.
Remember, he won the Grand Slam Cup. I mean, the Germans, they wanted to have the
million bucks.
Yeah, they wanted to have the four majors rotate where they weren't always in the same place. With I remember David Wheaton with a toss, and but the sooner the better. You know, all the years that he went from Minnesota to Florida Academy, he was down at Nick Bollettieri's, and a lot of positives, but a lot of times players don't get the technical input at an early age.
Yeah.
With, there's so many things. When you think of the stats as well, if you can make the first volley, where you hit that volley from, I think in doubles, it's amazing. Juniors, if they do go to the net, they're trying to just hit a volley as hard as they can. If they could just make that first volley and join their partner up at the net, form a wall. And same thing we say in singles is make two shots, form the wall, and if you're going to miss where you're side by side with your partner.
Capture the net. Yvonne, what do you got
for the forehand volley?
Forehand volley.
I like the drill with the net tape, where you bring up person up to the net and say, look, so the targets, let's say that pole in front of us, are my strings going to be facing this way at the contact, towards the net post, or up, or where are they going to be facing? And most people are logical enough to say, yeah, the strings at the contact should be facing where the ball should be going. And then I say, well, okay, so if it's coming really fast at you, in doubles, for example, they're going to blast a big forehand at you, which most people do nowadays. Would you rather have your racket open or towards the contact? Towards the contact. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. Logical, progressive steps. Okay, so here's the drill. Face along the net strap, turn, put your racket square on the net strap, and just make a linear motion towards your contact. Keep your strings as long as possible towards your contact, long hitting zone, and the logic behind it is very powerful. A lot of players that have these downwards facing strokes on the volleys, they don't give two thoughts to why they miss or when they miss. They just think, well, I just need to hit it more often and then I'll get better at it. And, it can only go so far. The bad math, you hit a ceiling very quickly, especially on volleys. If you swing you're not swinging the wrong direction from where the target is. Your target's straight ahead of you and you're swinging down. The way you explain it, it's also very powerful. If you explain it in a way where it makes sense and where what they're doing really doesn't make sense, it kind of clicks in their head. We had a kid here recently who had a similar problem. We went out quickly, tried to change his forehand and his volley in a short period of time. So we start with the volley. Okay, you turn for the volley, you go forward. Okay, makes sense. Now for the forehand, simplicity, turn for the volley, just make a circle towards the target. And then, if you make it in a logical sequential order of, okay, does this make sense? Yes. Does this make sense? Yes. Okay. Then that's how you should be doing it. And, that's where the knowledge comes in. That's where, I'm grateful to have found out about the information that Steve, collected and made into what's now known as the GreatBase, nonprofit now. All the education and information is online for free. And so that's how I found out about it. And I'm so grateful for it. But if I didn't find out, I wouldn't have known. I wouldn't imagine myself intuiting that. I would still be stuck in my ways. So information is very powerful.
Yeah, I think that the having the racket up at the net, put the racket above the net, keep the racket at a 45-degree angle, and just practice. As Andy was saying, momentum forward, step and swing. We have people trace the swing on the forehand volley, other strokes as well against the fence. Path of the racket, path of the target. The degree of difficulty, Vic would be the first one to say, if you want to shoot the ball out of your armpit, you can hit the ball any way you want, but can you make the shot? Vic would refer to himself as a toad. He's a great comedian. He'd pick on himself first. But I remember when he left the Kramer Club and he was running those Vic Braden tennis colleges, he was working primarily with adults. And he was doing that so he could fund his research. But I remember he said, yeah, I'm working with toads. And with, people don't realize it. Vic, you want to ask him about someone like Lou Hode. He spent so much time when he was helping run back in the barnstorming days with pros and what Kramer put together. But if you don't volley, you don't volley, and you need to have the reps. And I think one thing that players don't have is the instincts to volley, because if you don't go up, you don't go up. I mean, you don't have the recognition skills, and such an emphasis on winning. Instead of saying, I want to be able to play the game down the road. I want to have a future in this game. I want to have my best tennis be ahead of me. And unfortunately, that's not the way most people are wired. It's like, they want to win now. Should we do this, guys? Should we go from forehand volley to forehand ground stroke, or should we go from forehand volley to backhand volley?
I think we could cover the backhand volley quickly, because the physics are the same. Like you said earlier, knuckle guidance on the backhand side, and then the grip change. Vic advocated a grip change, forehand to backhand. And that's always been a debate, whether there's time. It's been proven in research that there is time, but you have to practice. If you've got time to turn your shoulders, you can switch your grip. Same things apply. Obviously, you're going to straighten your right arm if you're right-handed. Try to play from the shoulder, but think of the knuckles or your ring finger being your guide. Left arm goes back, action and reaction. So as your left arm goes back, the right arm goes forward.
Vic would say, if you would just take 5 minutes for 5 days, sit in the chair and practice your grip change.
Mm-hmm.
And, your hands can be fast. You used to do that drill where your hands can be faster than your feet. You can make the change. I liked how Vandermeer used to say, which takes more time, where you turn and don't change your grip, or you turn and change your grip. And there was no argument. It takes the same amount of time. You're taking the racket from one place to the next, but just as you're aligning the racket to hit a backhand volley, as you're setting it up, you got to change your grip. It's like chewing gum and walking. How's it go walking and chewing gum at the same time? But I think the awareness, the acceptance, and the commitment. And we were talking to Clayton Stanley on the last podcast. Somebody that his story goes back with us 44 years, and it was just okay. Just tell me the fundamentals. And you just think, if a kid's learning to play basketball, okay, we're working on fundamentals. The sport I grew up in, skating, you're not going to say, well, I think I'll stop this way. The tennis it's just amazing that way. It's like anything goes. Anything goes from a technical standpoint.
Yeah, and especially when you're trying to compare yourself, let's say you're 10, 11, 12 years old, it's not really fair to the student, right? To say, okay, here's the way Federer hits it, just as far as the nuances go, because they're fully developed, physically. So just starting from the basics and then building upon that foundation is what you should be after.
Yeah, you think of someone like Todd Woodbridge, our fact checker, Andres Barbosa. I believe he got to the semis of Wimbledon singles one year. But, he won so many doubles titles. He was obviously very well taught from the service line in.
Yeah,
and with you're hard pressed if you're at a college tennis match, men or women. Now it even has men or women where the players are serving volleying, but to actually pick out one good backhand volley, because players don't have the grip on the right side of one. The racket face is way open, and the left elbow can be down, say for a right-hander. Why don't you comment on the film we show of Pete Sampras hitting a two-handed backhand volley when he was a young kid? Yeah,
on the court with Robert Lansdorp in the background, doing a 4-ball drill, approach shot, volley overhead, but hitting with a wooden racket, full-size court, 10 years old, two-handed backhand volley. So just to stabilize the racket head. So even if you know you're going to do a one-handed volley, you have to learn how to do both. Because even in high-level doubles, guys will hit two-handed volleys, close to the net, or even their left hand will just stay on the throat of the racket if they're right-handed, and just, put it away just to stabilize the racket. So, but as you're learning to do a one-handed volley, doing it two-handed will help you keep the racket head up and then have the path go linear, go towards the target. And then you can build off of that.
I heard Rick Macy say one time, and that's why it's great to have all sorts of different opinions, help navigate the waters, the wild, weird, wacky world of tennis teaching, that there should be a rule that you can't hit a two-handed backhand volley. But we take the stand where you have a better chance to learn a one-handed backhand volley by hitting a two-handed backhand volley, where you stabilize that racket head, you go forward. And most kids, they change too quickly. We recently filmed a mom as a training tool to help her daughter, and she came over from a foreign country, played college tennis, and all these years later to find out, well, you're really using your left hand as a crutch.
Mm-hmm.
Good
enough for the McEnroe family.
Yeah.
Two-handed volley, Patrick.
Yeah, back in the day when Connors was number one in the world, Fru McMillan was also number one in the world. They both had two-handed backhand volleys.
Yeah.
That's what I would say with my age now, amateur historian, is that how's it go with Einstein? If to really know your subject, you need to know the history of your subject. I think another problem with the one-handed backhand volley is people avoid it. I mean, I'm just all day long when I'm on the court telling kids, no, that was a backhand volley. That was a backhand volley. And they just slide over to play the forehand because, the shoulder housing hit trails, and they can support hitting or they can justify hitting. There's more strength for them to hit off the forehand side than hitting a one-handed backhand volley. Young players, no momentum forward, wrong grip. So they avoid the shot.
Yep.
And then when they avoid the shot, they're going the wrong way. They don't have the momentum going forward. And as you always tell people, you don't really have time to run around a volley. So as they do that, they get too close to the ball. The upper arm comes in. And I tell kids all the time, I said, don't get your feelings hurt. I know your mom and dad say you're special, but I've seen this problem 1,000 times. I just see it over and over and over again. With how about the grip on the backhand, one-handed volley?
Yeah, right side of panel 1. So it can help you square the racket up. At least you're trying to get your heel pad. If you're at a higher level of competency, try to get your heel pad to shift just to help square the racket up. If not, if you're going to play flat and forward, you've got to adjust your wrist. And, if your grip is too far over, you're going to put your wrist in a position that is susceptible to injury.
I think, Vic Braden, the man, Vic Braden, the resource. I remember when he first was on TV, you'd say, okay, the backhand, base knuckle on number 1. But you really, the grip with the least amount of adjustment, it's on the right side of 1 because you have to be able to play that low volley. There's the same rationale why it's, justified for someone to try to play with a composite grip. Coming back to the composite grip that used to be called the Australian grip, where your hand's basically, and everybody's hand is slightly different. That's why they have the study of palmistry, the gypsies can read your palm. But
also when you put your knuckle straight on 1, the heel pad has a tendency to be on, towards 6, even for, Western, even further than the Western Hawaiian. And so when you go on that right side of 1, it tends to put the heel pad closer to where you'd want anyway for topspin backhand.
I think one problem people have with volleys is they are overhitting. They just line the racket.
Yeah.
Line the racket. It is a swing, but it's a forward swing. The word efficiency is just, when you see kids that look like they're muscling a volley, that's a problem.
Yeah. Yeah. If you're squeezing onto the racket too tight, in injury prevention, that's where most of the tennis elbows and things like that happen. The most amount of shock and jar and all that is because people are gripping onto the racket so tight before the hit.
Yeah, I think you could comment on racket displacement too, that players don't hit the geometric center, especially the players that are severely going high to low, and then the ball's gone, approximately 70 milliseconds. By the time they feel they hit the ball 7 to 11 feet away from them, and they get that feeling of turning under. I know years ago, Vic had the tape of Brian Gottfried, and Brian, Arthur Ashe said, hardest worker in tennis. He was 3 in the world, I believe, one time. Practiced on the day he got married. But he said, well, I drive the ball at first, and then I turn the racket underneath for control.
Yeah.
Mike Custard sent me a video the other day of some instruction for the volley. And, it's great just to see some instruction on the volley on the internet, but
won't get too many views.
The one thing is that people don't really understand, having that racket face square at the hit.
Yeah.
Here's a Vic line about feel. You haven't felt it in your life.
Yeah. I just don't have a feel today. You haven't had it in your life. Yeah. He would say you don't really want to be basing your game off of finesse and feel. You want to be based on, hey, I know I've got solid fundamentals. I know I have a hitting zone on each side, so if I can be off on my timing, I'm going to be good.
You did mention Louis Caillet. I remember when he's a French Canadian. He was in Canada and he was in charge of the action method. I know that the Irish Tennis Federation finally broke away from the British Tennis Federation's curriculum, and I trained some Irish coaches, and Louis will say, well, he's working with world-class players. But again, coming back to basics, and when you watch the pros so many times, they're not in the ready position, quick exchanges. They have the racket right across their body because the ball's they know the ball's coming right at them. And from your nose to your toes, you have much more range of motion when the volley's coming right at you. So I think that's another example of where, at the grassroots level, developmental levels, the pros, when you watch them in doubles, you'll see that racket. It's kind of like, I would say they hold their hand in the breadbasket right in front of their stomach, so because they know the point's almost over, and if they're right-handed, the person on the other side is trying to hit them in the right hip.
Yeah.
They're not trying to go around them and over, and they're going to go right through them. In high-level doubles, just about every point, it ends as a -F. And actually, it's harder and harder to see high-level doubles. Like this past the Olympics, the Laver Cup, entertaining doubles, but not high-level doubles. And people playing doubles that don't know how to play doubles. And I do think that's amazing, where I do think there's so much edifying. You're great, I'm great, we're all great. And, I just can't see, people arguing with the success of the Bryans, for example. If you look at the history of tennis, if you look at Shriver and Navratilova, all you got to do is go back and, how's the saying go? Go with the best and forget the rest. On how people volley.
Yeah.
Anything else? Two-handed versus one-handed. Let's talk about when to change. When should someone go to a one-hander? They don't necessarily even have to do that, but when should they change?
Well, be working on it like we do, slowly, where they can keep the racket head up or stabilize the racket head. But when you feel like you have the strength, the stability, then you can start to make that change more permanent. If you can keep the racket path going the way you want it to. But if it's just too much, the force of the ball against the racket, too much to try to keep the racket head up, or you're having to take excessive swings, big back swings to get racket head speed, then you don't want to go to it.
No, I think that's where, siblings or a parent with a child is to practice that one-hander even when they're really young. I made a video the other day for a really small player, and actually two, just here in the last 2 days. And start practicing one-handed backhand volley from the get-go. But when it comes down to drilling and playing, they're just not really going to be strong enough.
Yeah, shadow swinging it. Going back just quickly, just reminded me when you said, doubles ending in a minus F as far as the language. Bill Jacobson, a minus F is a forced error, a forcing error. I was talking to Jordan Leiden the other night. He was visiting this area, and we were at dinner, and he said I was at a coffee shop, and I saw this guy with a U.S. Open hat, and he got to chatting with him. And what's your name? Oh, Bill Jacobson? Yep. And so they had a nice conversation in Northern California.
Oh, what a sweetheart of a guy. As far as information, if I had to have a rank list, and I've been asked, I put Uncle Vic 1, Bill Jacobson 2. Like, just what he brought to the game with, I asked him to be a guest on a podcast. He's older now and said he didn't think he had the staying power for a long conversation. Jordan came to visit us at Baylor University, correct?
Right, yeah.
Yeah, the coach and his Joey Scrivano, his assistant. We had 53 people, and we have a tournament, and it's a target tournament. And of course, Joey, he could just see it. The guy hits the ball well. So anyway,
he was a high school academic All-American. He only practiced maybe 4 hours a week because of his studies. So he wasn't really able to put in that much time, but he's done really well.
That's where, going back to basics, that expression, if you stop playing tennis, my son Mikhail was here not too long ago, and he stopped playing tennis maybe at 13, really playing competitive tennis. And that expression, but the brain takes you back to where you stopped. Yeah. Or another expression, it's like riding a bike. I mean, it is so, so important for people to learn to volley. Vic's favorite drill was rat-a-tat-tat. Two players start at the baseline. They feed the ball at each other, and they just come in and they're hitting right at each other. And that's one thing that's really affecting not only doubles, but it's affecting singles. That people, the art of volleying is fading. It's fading.
Most lessons I start are with the volley. You get back to the ready position and work on turns, but just to make sure you spend some time. And for beginners especially, that sense of accomplishment, achievement, because overall it can be very simple. So you can get some success right away, some confidence.
Oh, and beginners are afraid of the net too, afraid of getting hit by a ball.
The 2.5 inch or so sphere, people are afraid of it.
I always tell people it's not a lacrosse ball. It's not a hockey puck. You don't need a helmet. Yeah. It does sting a little bit. With anything else on volleys, guys?
Yeah, there's one thing where, if you put your racket down on the floor, on the backhand side on its edge, right in front of you, and you bring it up to your nose, the racket face is still pointing towards the target straight ahead. Whereas on the forehand side, again, for righties, you can't do that. So when the ball's coming right at you, it's best to hit a backhand volley. And no, not many people do that. They run around the backhand and hit a forehand volley. And if you've been doing that your whole life, it's very weird, to say the least, feeling to hit backhand volleys that are coming right at you. But it makes a lot of sense. You can get close to the net. One more thing is, when you're hitting volleys, you have a momentum forward. And if you carry the momentum, you can get further away from the ball. For example, if it's coming right at you, if you carry the momentum at an angle, rather than stopping and taking a step to the side, you can get further away if you just carry the momentum at an angle.
It reminds me of the Battle of Shea Gupta. I know you both know Shea.
Shea the Ripper?
Shea the Ripper.
Shea, I still have the photo. It was for our listeners.
I saw Shea at the French Open this year. For
our listeners, it was a keychain that he's given for attending a tournament or participating. And so the Battle of Shea Gupta, I've been through this battle many times, but thinking about that because I made a phone call today. A few years from now, I'm going to borrow some money from Shea. Bright guy. He was taking calculus in kindergarten. So Gupta, I remember his dad came to visit, and he was a young guy, and they came together at that time. They eventually relocated to work with us, but he wanted to hit a one-handed backhand volley. I said, well, first of all, you don't hit volleys. Secondly, when it does go to your backhand volley, you run around it and you hit a forehand volley. And so anyway, he's obviously become a solid tennis player, and now he can volley one-handed. But you're best to turn, change your grip, straighten your arm, use your left hand initially, volley with two hands, but from the get-go, practice with a one-handed backhand volley. I've had a lot of fun over the years with videos. You're in the room with the player and the parent and go, well, we're going to look at your one-handed backhand volley, but you're going to see that you hit it two-handed. And they do. It's just like money. They hit it with both hands on the racket, and then they let go. And then, it's just amazing. So no, you need to be able to bend and hit a shoelace volley. You don't need to stand straight up and let your racket go down to your shoelaces. So it's just amazing how people have so many things backwards. When people first go on a tennis court, they've never played tennis, they'll say, because they don't know tennis terminology, say, you want to volley some? Say, no, that's the rally.
Yeah,
the volley is the ball that you hit before it bounces. The conventional volley, that's a lost art. It's just amazing how many people, because of the ready position, because they're waiting with their grip on 4, they play a swing volley. You need to be able to hit both. We certainly teach and drill to hit both. But when you agree, guys, that it's a pretty safe bet you're going to see more swing volleys than conventional volleys.
Yeah.
100%. One of the issues with that as well is that most players aren't coming to the net unless somebody hits a semi-lob or a really slow floating shot, so then they can come in and play a swing volley, which for me, practice all the time. But yeah, they're not going to come in so much on the traditional short shot and expect to hit another volley.
No, and there's on the men's side and women's side. I mean, there's top 10 players in the world that they don't volley. I used to love to watch Selish. I have so much respect for her game, but she was so good. It was like people couldn't. She was dictating play, and they couldn't. When she did come in, they weren't forcing her to hit low volleys. Like Magnus Larson said about Sampras, his backhand's a weakness, but you can't get to it, just because he was in charge of the point. So basics, let's move on. What else do we have? Uncle Vic, 10 years ago. We're trying to carry the torch, the GreatBase. That's one thing we're trying to do, is carry the torch for the contributions that Vic Braden made for tennis.
I had a thought that we were just talking about, who in the modern game has good volleys. Alcaraz is always on the screen now, and he has decent backhand volleys, forehand volleys. I'm not talking about the grips or swings, but he hits it. He can hit it, and he can hit it deep, and he does, and it's great. And I was thinking, if he played himself, if Alcaraz played Alcaraz, and to one of them you said, okay, just hit more approach shots than you hit drop shots, he would win quite easily, in my opinion, because Alcaraz hits so many drop shots that if he played himself with his speed, he can get it, and then his volleys skills at the net would help him, dominate those points more than other players are. So, and just an interesting thought where, you see players do what they do. So that shows Alcaraz hitting all these drop shots, and you just remember the good ones. It's like, oh, he hits this great drop shot here, and wins this point, spectacular point here. And if you just sit down and watch a match that Alcaraz plays, a lot of the times he attempts a drop shot, he flubs it. He hits in the net, and they get to it, and he misses. It's not like a surefire thing. Yeah, it's great for him. But, you got to look at highlights with a critical eye. It's like, when I was, again, back in the day, I still am a huge Federer fan. It's just highlights. And it's like, oh man, these guys are unbelievable. But then you sit down and watch a live match, and they miss all the time. So, you don't want to skew your perspective. just watching highlights, just looking at like these 1-point shots where it's like he hit this crazy drop shot going around the backhand and then from the back of the baseline, and thinking that's what you need to do.
No, it's a great point. Very astute. I think skills, the world I grew up in, like say Bobby Orr, end to end, he was just amazing. Bobby Orr, rushing offensive defenseman. But if Bobby Orr was told, like you just mentioned, Alcaraz playing Alcaraz, okay, Bobby, you're just playing defense. Bobby, you're playing all offense. He'd be outstanding either way because he could skate so well. His movement, his speed, and he was just from a different planet. And with Alcaraz, we could comment on that. No, it's just amazing, the calculation. But one thing is they're waiting to pull the trigger on the forehand. So they just know how he can spread the court and how he can just tag a forehand. So they're back on their heels. But that's how he's been programmed. He's been playing that shot. Tommy Paul said it's true. He's out there entertaining himself. He just has oodles and oodles of talent. But, I'd say he's the new Fed where he can do it all. But yeah, so many times, I think now there's even a little bit more of a hitch on his serve. But it's myelin. Myelin is the speed and smoothness of movement, the substance the brain produces. And, it could be measured. He could have a faster serve. If you go back and look at some tapes, you were doing that not too long ago, watching Alcaraz as a kid. Yeah. But, you wouldn't convince me, if Alcaraz were to just play the approach shot and come in, the math is on his side. And, basically he's surrendering the net. He's giving the net away when he hits the drop shot. It has to be very, very effective.
It works because he's playing in a time where, going back to an earlier point where swings have become so much more complicated. The ready position is not centered, so people are backing up, starting further back, drifting back behind the baseline, and then the drop shot opens up to more of a higher percentage play, even though in itself it's a low percentage play. I've heard you say, Steve, from Pancho Gonzalez, the only time you should play a drop shot is when you don't need the point. And, the rules don't seem to apply in that case for Alcaraz. He'll do it on the first point when he's break down. He does it as like a surprise. And so, you can't look at the top players for technical, tactical guidance. Look at them for inspiration.
No, it's amazing how many stories come from Braden. Braden was always talking about Gonzalez. It was funny. He said, my job was to walk behind Pancho and apologize to everyone he insulted. Pancho Gonzalez was playing one time and a guy had a heart attack and the match stopped. And Gonzalez said, where in the rule book does it say play stops if someone's having a heart attack? Play should be continuous. So get off on a tangent, but Vic asked Pancho one time, what was your greatest rush of adrenaline? He said, well, when we were robbing.
Greatest thrill.
Yeah, greatest throwers. Well, when, as a burglar, when I was on the second floor and robbing the house and the people came home. Yeah. People came home. But, that's where, certainly I've heard you say it, Andy, that people could listen to us and think that we're boastful, cocky, egotistical. But when you really were fortunate to have spent so much time with Vic, there's just so many different levels of play. And to think, well, this is what Laver could do. This is what Lou Hode could do. This is what Gonzalez could do. This is what Kramer could do. And, I think of that so often. What were the players of yesteryear, even the commentators? And, Jack Kramer, he did TV and so did Gonzalez. If they were commentating a match and Medvedev was that far back, they would just go, what is he doing?
Yeah.
What is he doing? I would just serve, come in. First of all, spot servers. That's where, even Roger Federer was so good is, he didn't come to the net enough. And, I think people just need to listen to Roger. There's so much information, so many interviews with Roger. It's not, what did Roger say about Roger? And that, it's really interesting. Even like say Lendl Lendl's number indicated that he'd be very successful coming in, but most champions are very, very stubborn. But coming back to Federer, he said, no, I just like my forehand better than my volley. I trusted my forehand better than my volley. You would never convince me otherwise that, he didn't need to run around his backhand and play a forehand into Nadal's lefty forehand. Or then when Djokovic comes up and he has a Agassi like backhand and he's running around his forehand, hitting into Djokovic's backhand. But the one thing about the basics is that it lends itself to being able to talk about every aspect of the game. Yeah, because it's all one. It's one.
Yeah.
It's one package deal. Yeah,
right.
We can go with some ground strokes.
High, low, high, and inside out. Gravity. Sources of power. Gravity.
Yeah, the kinetic chain. It was really amazing how much Vic Braden helped Gideon Ariel helped Vic Braden. For our listeners, Gideon was one of our guests on the podcast. Biomechanist, computer scientist with, you can see Gideon, you can see movement, but you can't see forces. Getting that ground reaction force, uncoiling the kinetic chain, it's really not that complicated, but you're not going to hit the ball that well if you go out and you play tennis on a pair of roller skates.
Yep.
Race to the bounce.
Can't shoot a cannon from a canoe.
Yeah, race to the bounce, get set. I'd say most tennis players, they're not aware that they don't lift. And if they do lift, they lift after the hit, and therefore it's of no value. For those who are new to Vic Braden, it's great. I have people all the time, they still search and buy his books. But tennis is a lifting game. You have to lift. And Vic used to say and I know no one spent more time with Vic besides his widow Melody than you at the end, is that at the end, Vic was saying the number one tip is let the other person get in their head, let the other person think they're going to lose. Mm-hmm. But he, for forever, his thing, the number one thing was people just don't get the racket hit below the ball. It's just amazing. I'd say most people are into speed than spin. Biggest mistake, people are just trying to hit the ball hard. If you try to hit the ball hard, you won't hit it right. But if you try to hit the ball right, you'll be able to hit the ball hard. People hitting with true topspin.
And just going back to lifting and all the 3D studies they can get in and that I started to do from the Indian Wells tournament, those 10 years where we had 3 cameras on the stadium court, it was really hard, really never happened that you would digitize a player and the center of gravity wouldn't be going up. But you'll hear that now. I mean, some of these kids online will say, imagine you have a roof over your head and don't break through the roof. And, the acceleration rate stops or goes down when you don't lift. And the other thing is, I used to hear Vic, even if you don't get your front leg straight, if it locks out, right? If it's bent but it stops, then it'll transfer the energy. Because you can't always get your feet set in a position where you can really use a ground reaction force. But if that link still stops, you'll still transfer the energy.
Go back and mention the point you made with the roof.
Just saying, where if you imagine if you're hitting and you had a roof on top of your head, that you wouldn't go up, that you wouldn't hit the roof. So basically staying down.
Okay.
But that's just not the case. Nor do you want it to be the case.
Vic Braden, if you're playing someone who can hit topspin on both sides, you will finish second in a field of 2. Most people have a little bit of flutter. They have a combination of topspin and side spin on their forehand. A lot of people don't realize they're not really hitting clean, true top because they're, especially on the forehand side, but really both sides. I mean, as you know, you do the same thing as film, is you've got to record, you got to document it. And most people have the contact point so close to their body. For our listeners, Vic used to use what was called a cherry picker, and you just look straight up and you see this red light. It's very difficult to pull that off. I know at this college I worked at, Tyler Junior College, we did that for a little bit, where we rigged it where we could film down on a player. The best players hit the ball so far away from their body.
Yeah.
And, power is related to the radius squared. The player, that's the center, they're the center of the circle. And so the radius is half the diameter. So yeah, you want to really be hit way away from your body.
Closing the racket face was ahead of its time. Having the racket face closed at the bottom and then being able to swing away from the body like that to hit topspin, and it's not to be on edge. People thought he was radical, talking about closing the racket face and, showing the players of old that they were rolling their forearm to get the racket vertical, and you had to be within 15 milliseconds, and it was a real timing issue.
When the racket face is closed, then and only then, you can truly swing inside out. And using gravity, letting the racket free fall. Most people, they're recruiting muscles. Vic, based on his age, came from World War II. A kid had an open racket face. Vic used to say that kid will be dead in the water. The Marines coming off the PT boats, Normandy, storming the beaches, running in gunfire. That was it. They'd be dead in the water. Yeah. And it's just interesting, where do comments come from? And that's one thing that has improved, that the racket face is closed more on the forehand side, because years ago, I was a victim of that. The victim's a strong word, but so many people were lied to. It's still going on every day. That's one thing we're trying to do with the GreatBase is it's really tragic when kids are lied to. They want to learn how to play and they're just given bad information. But years ago, people were told to play with one grip. Yeah. I remember when Francois Durr used to play, the French player, she had a total palm up, like a 3-5 ladies player. Yeah. Or Vic used to say she could choke a bull with 2 fingers. But the way she hit a ball so softly that the pros, they weren't used to playing against someone who would serve so slow. And many times they would miss in the net because they'd be early, because they had a roll in their swing. Vic used to call that, it looks like a wave coming off the ocean. The racket face is open, but they have to turn it for vertical, but then the racket keeps turning. That's where the follow through is the end product of the swing. And Vic used to say, well, in one sense, the follow throughs, the ball's already gone, but it's an insurance plan. Vic would do that demo where you hit a ball at contact and you take his racket immediately backwards. And he'd rally with people, get to the contact point immediately, go backwards with his hand. And when people were told the miss, come over the ball, turn the doorknob, windshield wiper, where do you think that all comes from?
From what people see, especially in real time, where, the human eye sees 24 frames a second. If you relate it to a camera, the hit's a 4 millisecond event. You could say 3 to 5, but around 4 milliseconds. So you really don't see the hitting zone. You don't see the impact point where the wrist is fixed, and even after, slightly before, slightly after. And so you just see that end product where the racket is, if you're a right-hander, off to the left, or maybe even your left pocket. You don't see how far out and up the racket goes. When I did the 3D stuff with Federer, the length of the swing would go through an alley, 4.5 feet. Actually, it was on the backhand side, over 5 feet. But so that's what you don't see. And so you see that look where it looks like a windshield wiper. But the most important part is the moment of truth, contact, and then a little bit after. And that's your insurance plan. If you're a little bit early with your timing, you're good. The follow through has zero impact on where the ball goes because it's already happened. The hit's already gone. So it's really, what's the angle and speed that you're swinging up? 17 degrees up is basically a flat shot. So it's always low to high. You can't hit horizontal. We've mentioned this before, Vic being the comedian. To hit horizontally, you have to hit 212 miles an hour. And if you could do that, you'd have hair on your tongue and live in a tree. So it's, just a physical impossibility to swing horizontally and get the ball over the net.
Well, certainly the eyes definitely play tricks on us. So the great legendary baseball player, Ted Williams, he used to tell people that he could see the ball hit the bat. And Vic used to say, well, he's not telling us the truth, but he's a big guy and I don't want to tell him.
Again, the feeling of it all versus the fact of it all. It could be a feeling that you do certain things come over the ball, but that's all it is. It's not reality. It's just a feeling.
Well, actually, when you tell people to come over the ball, it could help people, especially back in the day where people didn't have a solid Eastern forehand grip. So come over the ball, they're going to start closing the racket face. And, it could be, that wasn't the intention when they said come over the ball, but all of a sudden, instead of having an open racket face, the player's trying to approach the ball with the racket face closed. Inside out, I think we should go through that. I think that's a lost term. I think that people are confused when they hear inside out. They think of running around a backhand and hitting a forehand. But inside out was a technical term where you're going from close to away. You're swinging from the inside to the outside. And that's where like all these things, it's just amazing. Like today, serve +1. I don't think that young kids need to hear serve +1, or they're just looking to crank a forehand and get a backhand before you run around your backhand.
Serve and volley is serve +1. It's just a pattern. Okay, you can find patterns, but learn how to hit every shot from every position. You got to be able to hit a backhand. Yeah.
Well, when I first got into tennis, there was always players that hit two-handed. But Jimmy Connor was born in 1952, Chris Evert 54, I think Borg 56, and the two-handed backhand has definitely changed tennis. I like the Nicky Pilic drill for Djokovic, where he made him hit a one-handed backhand with topspin, a left-handed forehand, then a two-handed backhand. Short term, say some kid falls off their bike and they're righty and they sprain their left wrist, and you can teach them to just hit a one-handed backhand. Because a lot of times people on the two-handed backhand, they're cheating. They drop the racket head below the wrist. And it's interesting when they do that, the racket's actually further away from their body. The racket's lower, but tennis is a game of random shots. It's not like you're just hitting backhands. So that comes back to the interrelationship of strokes. And I like what you said about you'd like to start teaching people to volley. So many stories. I was at the Roddick Tennis Academy, and I was asked to help this girl with her backhand. So I fed her some balls, brought her up the net, had her hit some volleys. But I was asked to help with her topspin backhand. So I just taught her, okay, turn. Just hitting volleys. Yeah. And one of the coaches, it was Leo Lavalle, a very good player from Mexico. He said, Steve, we asked you to work with her backhand. I said, I am. I said, just give me a couple minutes. Just give me a couple minutes. Yeah. And she just turned. She had the racket above the wrist, and I said, now just turn further. And that's the interrelationship of strokes, the interrelationship of spins. So anyway, this girl hits a backhand, and Leo yells out, "It's official. We do not know what we're doing." I've always thought that some of my experiences that touring pros, they're a little bit they're happier in their own skin. The teaching pros, so he was a very successful player, so he didn't really have a problem saying, "Well, I guess I need to know more about forehands and backhands." Similarities and differences between the ground strokes. Why don't you go with that a little bit? Between the forehand and the backhand.
Well, if you're going forehand and backhand, let's say you go forehand and two-handed backhand, it's basically the same. It's a left-handed forehand. The hypertrophy, the swelling in the left forearm. I'm hitting a two-handed backhand that the push is coming from the left arm. But the physics would be the same. The contact point is basically in front, just even with or slightly in front of the stepping foot. the body be the same. High, low, high is the idea. The body is going to be at a 45 on the two-handed backhand. So the same with a forehand. If you stop the third link or the trunk, then the racket goes 1.5 times faster. And then on the one-handed backhand, you're going to play it further in front of the body, and you're going to be sideways at the hit. And Vic's, classic follow through for the one-handed backhand was ATA, air the armpit, or make a little archway that you could walk under. But as far as the physics go, nothing changes. You've got to swing up to hit topspin. You want to swing away from the body. All the same basics.
Yeah, ATA.
The ball doesn't know whether it's being hit by a forehand or a backhand. So it's got to do the same thing on the forehand side as it does on the backhand side to get any particular result. Or hit any particular target with a certain amount of speed or spin. The racket's got to do the same thing.
Vic used to sell T-shirts in his pro shop. What a magnificent pro shop they had at one time. And it was ATA, air the armpit, rising socket, not a rotating socket. The shape of your swing has to match the shape of the court. It's actually very easy to teach a one-hand topspin backhand. One time I was working at a fundraiser, and there might have been 40 people there. We had a big screen TV. It was on some indoor courts. And I said, all right, we're going to teach everybody to hit a one-handed topspin backhand. And we looked at Federer's backhand because everybody loves Federer. Mm-hmm. And we just did a few progressions. And you could get people to hit a one-handed topspin backhand. It wasn't like they were rallying. It was just balls were being tossed to them. And, just turn, get the arm straight, just efficient grip. Get the racket face closed. So then when the racket face closed, you can go away from your body. And that hit and freeze in the body balance position. I've told this story so many times. I was first teaching tennis in Germany back in the day. Women wouldn't shave underneath their arms. And I was teaching, for the most part, I was teaching tennis teachers, but I was, on the court, and I was worried. Vic would hire many of the people I trained to go work at his camps in Germany, Switzerland. He was even in Spain at one time, Marbella. So, a woman lifts her arm and it's like, whoa. So I said, no, this is how you hit a backhand. You take your left hand and you hug your right arm against your body, and you just play all lower arm. Actually to talk to you, it's like Mark Hamlin came here to visit, and by request, we had on the podcast a second time. And, it's just great to hear people who've lived it say that he needs, or talking about Coco Gauff. She just needs to be taught. Someone needs to teach her to play with her upper arm.
Yeah.
She's
the upper arm's everything in tennis. Volley, ground strokes, serves, half the speed. So many things. I was going to say with the backhand and the forehand being, you saying the backhand, the one-handed backhand easier to teach or easier to teach is true, because on the forehand side, and you could try this if you're listening, is that as you go forward with palm to hit a forehand, you'll start to feel a pinch in your chest, in your shoulder, where the racket has to come to the left. You'll feel a pinch there, but on the one-handed backhand, you never get that pinch, so you can actually have a longer hitting zone. You can really go out on the one-handed backhand. And then the other thing Vic showed people was that the radius on the two-handed backhand was larger than the one-handed backhand, that you had more reach on a two-handed backhand than on a one-handed backhand. So that was also a myth. It's different if you've got a reach and, hit a slice, for example, let's say, but if you're just hitting a topspin ground stroke, the two-hander has a greater reach.
Yeah, go through that slowly. On the reach, go ahead and explain that one more time, if you would.
Yeah, just the two-handed backhand, that the radius is larger on the two-handed backhand than on the one-handed backhand. You can even just take two rackets and in your hand, one doing a one-handed backhand and one doing a left-handed forehand, let's say, and just do a swing, and you'll see that the two-handed backhand is a little bit further out than the one-handed backhand, because the contact point as well is further in front on the one-hander. So, yeah. Mr. Buster Vic.
Mythbuster. Yeah, we'll never know. My son Connor, he played with a one-handed backhand for the longest time, and then
I remember that.
to how's it go? Same message, different messenger. So, 13, 14 years old, he spent some time with Dave Anderson, who's been a guest many times on our podcast, and really has getting close to 40 years with us. But yeah, Connor was in that competitive environment. Of course, it's all relative. I mean, I didn't really think it was that competitive environment. They do have a lot of, to this day, a lot of juniors, a lot of very good juniors. Mm-hmm. But it's a junior development program. It's, but when you're looking at your peer group and go, well, I think I have a better chance of winning now. And it certainly did help him. But the one-handed backhand is more versatile. And, some people laugh and say, no one will ever hit that shot again. But you could comment on that. I do think it's like anything. If you start early enough and you do it the right way, you can play either way. But the versatility is, I firmly believe, like Ivan was when he's just talking about Alcaraz. Alcaraz could study Alcaraz and say, "Hey, kid, you have the skills. You could play differently. He could be even better." He's not. I think he's maybe 7'5" ahead of center. That's a guess for our fact checker. I wouldn't bet on that, but he's got an edge.
I'm not sure.
He's got an edge, but that's interesting. Because when kids are younger with a one-handed backhand, it's hard for them to go toe to toe, and as a result, they end up going to the net more. But go ahead. I interrupted you. Go ahead.
Well, one thing with Connor is I remember talking to my wife because she has a one-handed backhand, and he said, "Well, do you want to win?" Which I thought was funny. So Leah, my wife, she's got a one-handed backhand, but it's tough on the high balls, tough on the return of serve. I think that's where the advantage for a two-hander when the ball's up higher, and then also on the return of serve to be stable. But where, like you said, the versatility of a one-hander where you can hit on the run better. And most one-handers develop a slice more than the two-handed players do. With a two-handed backhand, you need to be supple with your upper body. You need to have both feet set to really unwind the links of the body. And that's where Vic used to always say, if you can get a two-handed backhand player on the run and trying to hit a pass, that's optimal. So if you can get them, that's where the cross-court approach shot, if you can get a two-handed backhand player on the move and then trying to pass you, they can't get their feet set well, so they can't hit as well.
With your wife, obviously smaller, petite, that's a different answer. But you mentioned David Wheaton earlier. I think of Todd Martin. Welby Van Horn used to refer to Todd Martin as a prototype player that overall he had very, very good ball striking skills. But you take big guys, it's like a Kyrgios. He certainly, in tennis terms, he's a good sized kid, and he's just guiding that backhand. People edify that, oh, his backhand's world class, but no one's attacking it. It's just a different time, and you look at the calculation. But like say, Roddick, who's a fantastic player, he's best American for pretty much for 10 years, and you heard James Blake say, well, wasn't the best athlete. Those guys are big buddies, and he didn't move as well. And you could speculate. But going back to no substitute for a good beginning. But that's, I think, also coming back to basics is, I think a lot of things become a lost art, or people are, I always talk about Taekwondo. I know nothing about it, but there used to be a brown belt and a black belt. But now it's like
I'll show you a few things next time I see you.
Yeah, we'll go at it. But anyway, so there's a rainbow. There's all sorts of different colors of belts. But and now it's not
money making.
Not Taekwondo. Take your dough. And but with that, at least with that format, you have to do ABC. You got to do XYZ. You have to do certain things to go from one level to the next. Mm-hmm. And one thing I've had many people do say, well, what do we do next? And you just don't stop working on basics. It has to be packaged, presented where you're working on anything and everything, but it still comes down to grip, swing, body.
Yeah. I was talking to Tom Brulé the other day, and he's going to have these groups of, 24 kids on 3 courts. And I was like, well, that's easy. No problem. But you can have those kind of checklists. Okay, you've got to know the dimensions of court. There's one thing before you can move on. You got to know the grips. You got to know the body balance positions from Wilbur and Horn. You have to be able to demonstrate the essential strokes, key positions, or even teach them to another kid. And you can check them all off on them. I mean, there's so much education that can be done foundationally that then you can then build off of. And like you just said, even if it's 5 minutes here or there every day, beginning of practice, end of practice, if you have a lesson plan, even better, to just cover some of those basics and work through a progression. And these days, with the way attention spans are, that works well anyway. And then go from block to variable to random practice.
Yeah, for our listeners, Tom Brulé, he's a coach. He's my age, older guy, and is in Minnesota. And many times, I've talked to him where, he feels like he's on an island. He's at a place where there's X amount of pros, and people are questioning what he's saying, what he's doing. But someone who you started out, the dad Philip and the daughter Ava.
Beitler.
It's a great story, but so now because Ava can hit the ball, and people go, wow,
shuts everybody up.
So now people are listening. But coming back to the 24 people on a court, the buddy system, peer teaching, practice partners, organizing space. I mean, I do think, especially indoor courts, we've talked about this on the podcast. Richard Hernandez wanted to address that, and we can just look to our right, Yvonne to his left, and look out 3 indoor courts, and you could do so much on 7,200 square feet, just one court.
Yeah, station training, and that's where all these basics, and then if you have the practical application to simple drills, you can keep people moving. You can keep them, just keep them going, whether it's fitness or technique.
Yeah, one of our students at the time, Ryan Fleming, he was doing this up in Chicago. And at that particular time, I remember, he really wanted to help the club. And the owner sent his son to me, and we did all this film. And it was just like, okay, this is what we did in a week or 2 weeks. And he's hitting the ball so much better. But people are so nervous, what does the customer think? What are the parents are thinking? They're always worried about the bottom line going down. And so he had a class, and what he would do, he had a large number, 1 court, had some teaching aids, but he would show slides of the pros. And then also too, then what you do is you have to, comp, have have a work study. I don't like to call it a scholarship, have a work study and have some of the better players come out. And then if the beginning players can see that the better players are doing the same drills, that's so powerful.
Yeah.
But we'll go back on strokes. But Philip and Ava, Chris Clore, we work with, one of the families that we've been working with the last 3.5 years. And Ava is on her way. She hits the ball great. They've got you started off with them with video, and that's one thing about the GreatBase is that, the families in the end get a junior tennis player down the road. And somebody else that's been a guest, Cole Reeves, is that you can eliminate the pro. Not that we're trying to do that, but it's you just need to make a study of it. And Vic used to say, hey, the best tennis teacher might be somebody who's teaching in their basement. It's not. Yeah. But with another gal, she's top 10 in the country now, and she had visited Chris Clore, and he sent me some film, and it's not like you need lesson after lesson. You just need the information, and then you need to go do the reps.
Yeah, you need self-discipline. What I was going to say briefly is, all this, the hard part with teaching pros that are into it as well is that it does take time. It does take time, but the end product is solid. But to learn an all-court game, all this stuff that we're teaching people to do to be able to hit every shot from every position efficiently, it does take time. There's no microwave. There's no cookie cutter way to it. You've got to put in the reps. But in the end, you're going to have a solid base, but also you're going to be a student of the game where you can understand when you miss, why you miss, be an independent thinker, problem solver, be able to come up with a plan when you play different people because grips and swings and all those things. But it does take time.
Well, the basics, it allows someone to really, it's like the foundation. You can build a house, but you have to go down before you go up, and you have to take your time. The story of the three little pigs. You got to take your time, build a house. Who wins the race, the rabbit or the turtle? Inch by inch, it's a cinch. Let's go with Ivan. Bring some discipline to this conversation. Ivan, what do you got? Ground strokes.
I see a lot of things about ground strokes. Circular swing for circular spin. A lot of players that come visit, it looks like they're holding onto a baseball bat. In baseball, the diamond, it's a diamond, so you have 90 degrees to hit into, whereas on a tennis court, it's an optical illusion. It's 3 feet short of being 3 times longer than it is wide. So it's a game of hitting straight line shots, and you have less than 20 degrees behind the baseline. So relating it back to baseball, you have less than half of a baseball diamond's width to hit into. So having the same type of swing as if you're holding onto a baseball bat really doesn't make sense. And another way, players tend to understand it is, if I hold a BB gun and I'm trying to get you, right? You're right in front of me and I spin around in a circle really fast. It's going to be very difficult for me to try and tag you. Whereas if I just stand straight ahead and let my arm swing around my shoulder in a circle, I have a lot better chance of hitting you because the BB gun would be facing towards you, for example, for a long period of time. And if you frame it a certain way, players will begin to understand. It's like, hitting zone, racket towards the target where my string's facing at the contact point. And then you introduce tennis math, 3 to 6 milliseconds. There's no time to roll over the ball, all these myths, and you start busting them in front of them with just logic. And unfortunately, just like Mike Valentine from a few podcasts ago said very, very well, don't confuse me with the facts. I've already made up my mind. The amount of logic you can throw at people, it doesn't matter how much logic you can bring to the table and say, hey, you're swinging this way. It's not the best for what the sport you're playing. You can go play a different sport, but the current sport you're playing, you need to move, you need to breathe, you need to lift, keep your head down. It's a big target, circular swings, circular spins. You need top spin. Top spin's created upward motion of the body and the racket. And you can't do that if you're swinging horizontally, just like if you have a baseball bat, for example. And logic is far. It's hard to find, especially in this sport currently. And I come personally from a unique position because I only found out about the information when I was 21. So I started playing when I was 8. So I had 13 years of, I'd say not the best instruction. A lot of the years I was just trying to teach myself, just based off of watching pros play, like many people do. And the logic to me made sense, and I'm so grateful that I found it again. But some people just don't want to accept it, and they say, tennis is more of an art, and it is both. It's both an art and a science, but you can't argue with the facts. If we go out there and skill test you, and you swing at it the way you swing at it, and we bring out a 6-year-old who can swing the ball not as hard as you, but better than you, and hits the target more often than you, it's hard to argue with the numbers. And it's just that's what I want people to get out of this, tennis math, very important.
Yeah, I think one thing that reminds me of the term common sense notion. It's just you can hit. People think they can hit down on the serve. I know we'll get to the serve. It's
common sense isn't common.
Yeah, it's logic. It's logical, intelligent. Well, I can hit down on my serve. Yeah, but I've said for years, people they don't turn to science, logic, or imagery. They just want to know who wins. But I think what happens very, very often is people are lost and they don't know their level. And there's just so many different levels. I mean, there's different levels of competency. There's different levels of tennis teaching, different levels of everything. But in this podcast now with Sock, Stevie Johnson, Jack Sock, Stevie Johnson, help me out here.
John Isner
and Query.
Isner and Query is, okay, what were their levels on their serve? Okay, what were the levels on their forehand? What were the levels on their backhand? And then you just break it down. We do have many, many great players now. It's almost like they're one-shot wonders. They're going to hold serve. They're just, I mean, that's not maybe fair to say that, like say, for example, Ben Shelton, Matt Glore, who's been in our corner for 15 some years now. He's back at the USTA. Humble, quiet guy. Say, okay, Matt, I think I asked Scotty Perelman this, who also is a big fan, had been around, he's been around Ben Shelton since he was, 10, 11 years old. And said, well, okay, let's have him just serve underhand. And, you obviously, I'm not taking the serve away from him, but, he's just all over the map. He gets so sloppy when he plays. And so just different levels. But how's it go? As a tennis player, you're only as strong as your weakest link. And, people, their whole game will be based on, their whole game really is based on their weakness. We sum up psychology in one word: feelings, and people are going to avoid. There's going to be avoidance. They're going to try to hide their weakness. And granted, in a match situation, you need to go with your strengths. But you also have to still work on your weaknesses. Who's next? What do you got, guys?
Well, we got on the underspin, overhead, the serve.
Go ahead, Andy. Let's go with the underspin backhand.
Backhand.
Got to knife it. Got to chip it.
Yeah, actually, the best underspins are almost flat. Not that many revolutions. I guess we could talk about the underspins and approach shot as well.
That goes back to Gonzalez talking about Rosewall, and someone said, well, it's sliced backhand. He goes, what sliced backhand?
What sliced? Yeah.
He hits that thing as flat as a pancake.
He hits that thing flat. Just think of the Bob Lutz, project with Vic. And that story. You tell it well, Steve, as far as, when he filmed him and he goes, yeah, we got him. And he thought his racket was coming down at a 45-degree angle. And you showed him the film and just showed him how the racket was nearly vertical at the hit and not a steep downward swing path that he thought.
Yeah, how that goes is Bob Lutz, great tennis player, played doubles with Stan Smith, one of the best players in the world, especially in doubles. And Vic was doing these PBS tips because at one time there was 3 stations, and the 4th station, there's no commercials. But they still had the timeout between, the 90 seconds in between games. So Vic entered everybody's living room back in the mid-'70s. So he calls up Bob Lutz and he says, hey, I'd like to use your underspin backhand on our PBS tennis tips. And Bob Lutz said, no, I disagree with the way you teach it. So Vic hung up the phone and he called him back a few minutes later. He goes, I tell you what, Bob, let's just film it and we'll just tell people how you hit it. We'll just teach you where to hit it. He goes, yeah, okay. And Vic hung up the phone and goes, we got him. So Lutz thought that he went down at a 45-degree angle. So Vic had this yellow piece of tape going down at 45-degree angle, and then the racket face was square at the hit, went back up. You lift, but it's not as violent. A lift is, hitting a big-time topspin backhand. But I was
going to say he had a video of McEnroe because McEnroe was doing commentary and saying that, you stay down. And he played this clip in the classroom all the time that it showed McEnroe hitting topspin where he's off the ground, and then it showed him hitting underspin or slice where he was off the ground.
Yeah, Vic got a few of the pros mad at him where he's, well, Johnny Mac. He actually found out through Mike McLaughlin and the Braden Library that Gloria Connors had written a thank you letter thanking Gideon and Vic for helping Jimmy. His serve went from like 74 to 104. And that's how good Connors was. He was getting no free points on his serve. I mean, he was lefty and moved it around, but VJ Armitage was one to say, he goes, Jimmy, he doesn't have a very good serve. And so, Vic said, his serve goes 72 miles an hour, but his front goes 104. But he got some people mad at him with the term spastic. Oh, the kid's a spaz. Jimmy used to have blisters on the top of his feet and getting the aerial with high-speed film. Said, well, Jimmy, this is what you're doing with your movement. That's why your feet are getting torn up on the top. But Gideon, not being fluent with the language, said, you're a spastic.
You're a spaz, basically.
You're a spaz. It didn't go over too well.
Yeah, I was going to say, inverted bow, banana shape, slightly high to low. Obviously, depending on how much spin you want to put on the ball. But flat actually stays the lowest, topspin next, and then underspin, the incident angle of the bounce is actually the steepest if you keep it on the same trajectory, which is an interesting fact, another myth kind of buster that Vic showed in his studies.
I ask kids all the time, all right, your tennis IQ, let's that's one thing that we've done for years is that, we're not just doing private lessons. Like let's have immersion days. Let's hang out. Let's go to the classroom. Let's talk about it. And anyway, with the tennis IQ test is tell me why you hit underspin. And if they can give us answers like, well, when the ball's in flight, I can be in movement. I can get closer to the net.
Give you time.
Yeah, I'm keeping the ball lower. It's a trajectory that makes the ball low. And then my opponent gets approximately 50% of their pace from my pace. But it's, most people are just banging that. I would say most juniors today, when they hit an approach shot, they're hitting it as a point ender. They're not using it as a setup shot.
Right.
I was talking to somebody today, and he mentioned Jack Grapple. Jack Grapple used to say quite well is that the approach shot is your money shot, and your volley is your cash-in shot.
Right. I use that all the time.
Back in the day, he was Ask the Doctor. Now Mark Kovacs has that title, Ask the Doctor. And one has a PhD in, I believe, kinesiology, Kovacs, and one has a PhD in biomechanics. And but Jack is retired now, but it's great to know that he's still out there. But he was spoon-fed, or I should say, I was spoon-fed at the same time by Vic Braden as Jack Rappa. A lot of people don't know that. That's where he got his start in tennis. But he is an official. I mean, he's got the document. He has a PhD. I believe from the University of Illinois, where he coached a team for a while.
Yeah, some of the language we use, turn more than sideways. That will help you stay sideways. So when you turn more, you want to uncoil the body, but then you stop the upper body, the trunk. Again, the racket will accelerate 1.5 times faster. And then you keep your center of gravity ahead. That way, the body stays sideways. You can go forward towards the net, and then you can keep the racket matching the dimensions of the court. Obviously, the long, narrow sidewalk. So turn really coiling the upper body. Not these days you see people add that segment where they bend the forearm, kind of wrap it around their neck. And then there's a lot of, especially as the players, the pro players, as they're warming up or just casually hitting through the middle where the ball's close to them, you really see them swing left to right for a right-hander, or close to the body. So it's more of a side spin shot. So a lot of kids are trying to emulate that.
With application and design, building blocks, actually, you're the one through one of your colleagues got our logo designed. The light blue represents truth. Red, yellow, green represents the dimensions of the court. It's set up as a tennis court, but it's also building blocks.
Yeah.
But application, say, okay, I want my players to be able to hit an underspin backhand. We'll go out and play sets. You could do it from the ad court for righties. You could do it on both sides. Doesn't matter. If you feed the ball underhand and the person has to play an underspin backhand approach out and you play a set, you have to work on the skill. And Yeah, most people hit float slice. They don't hit drive slice. Yeah, why don't you go back to sidewalk? I think with the dimensions of the court, the 19.1 degrees. Why don't you just slowly go through that? We use that all the time for application, design, and practice.
Yeah, I think that's, again, starting with Vic's books, it's one of the first things that's mentioned is just the idea that the tennis court is not gigantic, that you should think of it more as a long, narrow sidewalk. You know, Yvonne said it already in this podcast, 3 feet short of being 3 times longer than it is wide, 27 feet wide, 78 feet long. And then the angle of the court, 19.6 from the middle, 19.1 from the single sideline and baseline. So you got to think of the court as this long, narrow, railroad track or sidewalk. And then you want to match your swing to those dimensions. It's not a circle. It's not, like Yvonne said, you're not in the baseball diamond. So you've got a very little area, but you can use, for example, the alley. I did this just today. You can use the alley, which is about 3.3 degrees wide. And so if you're just off a little bit, you're going to miss. So you really have to keep your body stable, your head still, so that you don't disrupt the flight of the racket path to hit it through the alley. So you could do that with ground strokes, but especially with the underspin backhand, stop your body, hand-to-hand forms a line, and have your knuckles track out through the alley. And that's something that, people, when they watch pros warm up and they're swinging, west to east, it's confusing. But that's not the way you want to hit an approach shot, especially. You want to stop the body so the racket accelerates. You want to have your center of gravity in front or ahead. You want to feel like your chest is leaning over your front foot so you can get to the net faster.
With group dynamics, again, coming back to application, we have kids drop hit a ball, their partner, their opponents on the other side, they catch it. You want to get to the point where they can actually just play a rally or play a set in the alley, hitting the forehand and then the backhand. It goes by pretty quick.
Yeah,
and
really fast.
Then if they're good players, like years ago on the bad grass, the top players in the world would just go play in the alley, and they were so good they could just they could rally in the alley.
Yep.
So it's very good to have people play in a confined space. And people think, as you said earlier, that people think the tennis court's gigantic. So we do it where winner moves up, loser moves down. They really get into it. So, we're looking across 3 indoor courts, and so it's 2, 4, you go 6, 8, 10, 12. You could have 12 kids. And it's a contest. They're drop hitting forehands and they're keeping score. And you just blow the whistle, say, okay, winners move up, losers move down. And then you can have lessons going on in the middle of the court. Say it's a rainy day, that rainy day situation. And how's it go? You really can't be innovative. You have to imitate before you innovate. And if you really understand, like you're telling Tom Belay about teaching 24 people on one court, all you need to do too is get out some skip ropes and say, does everybody here like oxygen? And you get people doing some, okay, skip rope hard for 3 minutes, and then now you go do this for 3 minutes. We have
training.
We have one of those assault bikes right by court 1, and this morning I had a young player. He's doing something for like 2 minutes on the court where I'm tossing balls, and then you put him on the assault bike for 2 minutes. It just says go. Just push.
Yeah.
I have to mention Naratilova. I always talk about that. Our podcast can be very repetitive, but that's part of education is repeat. There's a reinforcement, but take a tennis group. She won Wimbledon 9 times. And how many can a tennis group name 9 players that have been able to hit the underspin backhand the way she did? And I think that's where tennis history is, all this discussion, who's the greatest player of all time. Wouldn't it be nice if, okay, who had the greatest skill on this particular skill?
Yeah.
And, it's just like, well, no, can you imagine someone trying to be a world-class tennis player? And I'll say Pegula, she's one of the best Americans. And she's very solid. What a great player. But it's like, okay, Jesse, rate this shot. You do that player by player. You could take a John Isner. So okay, let's rate your serve, but let's rate your backhand volley. I don't know how many listeners are out there that have heard every podcast, but I guess there's still some. Should have a prize for that. And Manny Diaz.
You get through the pearly gates for that.
Tennis
no
heaven.
Small task.
Tennis heaven. So who? I'm asking who's more competitive, Welby Van Horn or John Isner, Welby Van Horn or Michael Pernfors, and two great players that played for him at Georgia, and just said, hey, if John Isner, if he had Welby's backhand volley, what do you have to say? Because he'd have a lot more money. But then to hear these guys on their podcast, it's pretty good. They're taking shots at each other, like Stevie Johnson. I mean, he dominated college tennis. Well, I believe he won the singles twice. No backhand.
Yeah.
You just think of Pete Sampras serving to that backhand and volleying to that backhand. I mean, a great player, but that should, those type of things like, okay, why? How could someone improve?
Yeah. It reminds me of a video, just talking about the Anderson backhand. There's a video that I made on the GreatBase Instagram where it was Steffi Graf and Yannick Noah, who both had underspin backhands that were good. And because a lot of the content that I made would come from comments or people judging. They would see how we have players hit and hold sideways and have the racket come back up like a little mini archway on the slice backhand, on the underspin backhand. And so I made this video that showed them, if you go back and search, you can see it. It might be something like underspin archway or something titled, but you can see where they go out, they hit the underspin, and then they let the racket, as you continue to go out, because of the way the shoulder is, with the radius, the racket goes up to that archway position on the finish. And so when you slow things down and you show people, look, this is exactly what Steffi did, this is exactly what Yannick did, then they can see that and then start to understand, okay, the stage development where we're not working on recovery, you're just working on the path of the racket, and then here's the finished look where we want the upper body to stop at the hit. It's a bit of an exaggeration, but it still happens before they start to face forward.
I used to love to watch Yannick Noah serve. I said a couple of weeks ago about the Laver Cup, you got Agassi who's going to replace McEnroe, and you got Noah who's going to replace Borg. Don't know who their assistants are going to be. Vice captain, I think Noah should pick Steffi Graf. To be interesting, her coaches, her husband's on the other side. With the Dutchman, Richard Krajicek.
Yeah.
He had great ball striking skills. I think it was 96 where he won Wimbledon. Stan Frankert was in charge of Dutch tennis at one time, and he played tennis at USC. But I just remember him coming to hang out with Vic. He was very curious about what Vic was doing. Braden's influence directly, indirectly. And I think passed away 10 years ago.
Low toss, turn, great serve.
Yeah.
Through the volleys as well. But
let's move on to the serve.
You want to go overhead first or serve first?
One thing I wanted to mention though is video is very powerful. We take players and we're fortunate to have, like Steve mentioned, 3 indoor courts. We have an upstairs classroom, a TV, so we can have a group of players sit down and okay, let's watch your strokes in slow motion. And most players don't know how they hit the ball at all, and especially when they get filmed the first time, it's drastic to see their faces when they look at themselves hit an underspin backhand. And because it's very unnatural for someone who had, no instruction or poor instruction to have the racket go out towards the target on the underspin backhand, mainly because they, have such influence from watching the pros and, you just can't see in real time what the racket face is actually doing at the hit. So you see these players' faces, it's like, okay, your target is straight ahead of you, especially if you see it from the back view. It's the most apparent. Okay, the star gets straight ahead of you. Your racket wraps around your head and it finishes off to the right side of the screen. How in the world are you going to hit that target consistently? And you just look at their faces and it's just dumbfounded. Like, I don't know. I just hit it. And then you kind of, again, you try and bring in the logic and understanding, have your racket go towards the target. And
coming back to Vic Braden, when someone like that, you look at their forehand or backhand, underspin backhand, doesn't matter. They leave the room and Vic goes, I wonder if they can find the bathroom. With but the serve, the first shot, sometimes the only shot, the most important shot. Welby Van Horn used to say the easy shot to practice, but the most difficult to perfect. It's amazing how people will neglect the serve. They hit some serves at the end of practice. We're working with this young player from Japan who's here, and his English is getting better and better. And I said, well, we haven't really talked to you about different spins or targets. You just need to change the serve. He would look straight up to the ceiling and arch his back, and his body would look like he was a pretzel. I don't mean a straight pretzel. One of those that's got 3 different circles in it. But people don't understand when you have to deprogram, reprogram. And I think I really feel sorry for college coaches. I mean, I would love to coach college tennis. I would say, our freshmen don't play. They're, we can't redshirt them. Okay, we can't redshirt them. They're coming in as a freshman. They're just going to train. Because, sometimes college coaches, a kid will be there 4 years and, granted they become more mature and this and that, their character, and maybe they become a great team player. A lot of times people leave hitting the ball the same way they did when they got there. And everybody's saying, well, this is talking about, like the Power 5 conferences. I would like to use college as a platform to launch my pro career. And Vic used to say, if you're 3 years later, you're still playing futures, you have no future. But the serve.
I like how you tell the story of the servant. Why don't you go into that?
What story is that? I've got a few.
Well, how tennis, got started and the servant putting the ball in play.
Yeah,
where's the
term come from? Where's the size of a tennis court come from? Sir Walter Clapton Wingfield. We went to high school together. But 1873, he put together the rules for tennis. But prior to that, tennis was a garden party, and the servant would put the ball in play from the side of the court.
It's cool.
That would have been much better for me. As an American kid, I just didn't like baseball. I played baseball, but it wasn't my favorite thing to do. I remember playing summer baseball and it'd be over and I'd get on my bike and go home and work on hockey in my driveway. And a lot of the kids I grew up with, they just played baseball all day in the summertime. And if you're throwing over and over again, again, that comes back to Milan. Yeah. Sam Snead, the golfer, basically you're trying to put brains in your muscles. And you just got to do it over and over again, throwing. We talked about Tracy Austin quite a bit during the Lansdorp tribute. She set her swing with her hand, so she didn't have that first 90 degrees. And then also her racket was slightly palm up. And, the story is where Gene Austin called. I was in the room and she stayed very close to Vic throughout the years and talked about how Jeff Lewis was there to go donate trophies from I can't imagine how many trophies the Austin family had. But he gave an endorsement to Roy Emerson. He said, Roy, it's going to be just like me. I didn't know how to teach her this. When I taught her, I didn't know the serve. I didn't know this and I didn't know that. I think that's the strength of Vic. I have a collector's item of Vic teaching tennis in the 60s, and on the volley, he was saying you peel the orange. So his thing is that once you find, once somebody can give you the scientific rationale to do something better. You just go cold turkey and go, this is okay. This is what we're doing. When someone can show you a better way, you just get after it. Welby for the longest time, he wasn't crazy about introducing the serve because he didn't want people to play. He wanted them to take their time and play mini tennis and learn how to hit ground strokes. And I do think it's a major problem, with tennis teaching organizations, federations, like here in this country, the USTA. A lot of people making the decisions, they haven't taught tennis. And with that, little kids trying to serve in a box. Little kids should just be able to stand right in the middle of the baseline and just serve anywhere in the court. But so really work on a throwing motion. Mm-hmm. Because most kids have pizza position pulled down. They don't have salute position twist up. And coming back to that time where we filmed 50 boys and 50 girls, we filmed their serve and their forehands. And it was over 90% close to a Western grip, over 90% some version of palm up. Yeah. Because it does at the tennis court, Vic, it creates optical illusions. They see their target straight ahead and through the net. Mm-hmm. And they go through several years of tennis, basically hitting underspin on their serve. They're pulling down. They're not lifting up.
Yeah. Yeah, basic throwing motion. And I know there's some tennis teachers that are kind of against that, but you can say it's a general throwing motion. You're trying to get the kinetic chain, coil the body. You really have horizontal forces, meaning, the body unwinding, and then you're trying to convert that to vertical at the end. And that's where, there's so many drills that Vic would do just to show the power coming from rotation versus having a big knee bend and going up and down just with the legs. But it's how you coil and uncoil. And if you coil your body, then you have something to uncoil and then go up vertically.
Yeah, for 15 years, I taught in Tampa, and we worked on the Hillsborough Community College campus. Earl Olson was a student of mine at Tennis Tech. He managed that facility for the longest time. So we had co-op, and it was on a college campus, and it was on a frequent basis during the month of March. Pro baseball starts usually April 1st, right? So, and where we would get our tickets, it'd be right next to the third baseman. Baseball players are so loose. They play so many games. I think they play 162 games. Baseball players don't have the anxiety that tennis players have. I love to watch a baseball practice where I think it's called a fungo bat. And the coach hits the ball in the air and one person catches it at a time. One of my brothers playing high school baseball, just a high school game, two outfielders collided, and unfortunately one of them was never the same. Very dangerous. So, everybody's watching you. It's not like they're on a tennis court, you have 300 balls. There's just one ball. They hit it way up there. Can you catch the pop fly?
Yeah.
And, are they going to put you in right field where you can pick your nose or pick dandelion? So, can you really play baseball? But yeah, just, a kid years ago with a baseball glove, and, they would just throw the ball into the glove. There's nobody to play catch with. Or then they'd toss it up on a roof and catch it. And it really wasn't fair for girls. And if you couldn't throw a ball, you'd have palm up. If a girl could throw the ball, it was called a tomboy because they were really into sports. But it's not a muscular activity. It's not like throwing the shot put. It's really interesting about, fairly accomplished players. Say some kid is playing college tennis. It's a pretty safe bet that they throw the ball palm, an American kid. I would say straight across the board, because the Americans had an edge by throwing footballs around and baseballs around, but it's a pretty safe bet that they can serve a little bit, but when they throw the ball, they have palm up. Mm-hmm. That thing about having a live arm. So we used to call it the third base position, and now we call it the Cobra position. Vic used to say the wrinkle in the wrist for the forehand volley, the forehand ground stroke. But your wrist is the other way. You collapse your wrist. Yeah. So the wrinkle's on the other side.
Yeah, underneath.
Yeah, you just got to be so loose. And, it's very interesting to ask people. Vandermeer used to say, used to always ask, what's more important, the toss or the swing? And almost everybody says the toss.
Yeah.
Vic used, or Dennis, I give a clinic. It's $20,000 per person, paying cash. I give a clinic on the toss. I'll teach you how to toss. But Vic used to just talk about Gonzalez's serve. At one time in Cleveland, I believe that's where it was, they had a pro tournament where you could only play one serve. I only had one serve. And Gonzalez
worked best for him.
He wanted easier. He would go into a room and go, "This room is perfect for me to practice my serve." Where if my racket just touches the ceiling, this is a great place for me to serve. So I can't toss any higher than the ceiling. Roscoe Tanner's father telling him, just find the highest leaf that you can reach to and go and just try to swing to that leaf.
Toss those leaves, yeah.
But, the down together, up together, the movement in the beginning. I think, telling people the serve is very much like the forehand volley. Okay. And forehand volley, leave your hands alone, just turn on the serve. Don't do anything, just turn.
Yeah.
Just turn. And, Vic had so many ways to explain things. The toss, the high toss, it just gives you more time to be crummy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the higher it is, the faster it's dropping through the window of the racket. The faster it's dropping through the window of the racket, the more perfect your timing has to be, the less time you have.
Yeah, and the ball weighs 2 ounces, windy day. There's been certainly players that have had higher tosses. Even Sampras, he had certainly a little bit of a scissors, but they time it where they're not slowing the racket down.
Right, exactly. You keep accelerating. That's the whole point, is the racket should just keep accelerating. If you stop, have a hitch, then you're at zero force. Mass times acceleration equals force. So if you pause, you're starting all over again.
Yeah. For people thinking about Vic Braden, physics is not a fad. We just use the term tennis math. Do you know tennis math?
The math on the swing, 450 degrees. If you keep your palm down, you make that lasso circular motion, then you're loose and you've got the racket traveling.
If the palm is down, the energy can go up. Vic used to have a great line. If your palm goes up, he used to talk about the lasso. He goes, if your palm goes up, you lasso your own horse. Yeah,
exactly. That's a great line.
Yeah,
you got to pull down.
He was so animated. He would, on the serve, it's the turn that makes the racket look like you scratch the back. It's not the scratch the back that makes the body look like it turns. And
I had that discussion with Tom Blay, because people are talking about, the racket drop. And it's like, no, if you try to force that movement, then it's like scratching your back and the elbow goes too far up. So you point the elbow up and now it can only internally rotate, Vic would say, about 30 degrees when you really want it to go 180. So there's all kinds of things where things you should teach and things that you shouldn't, just Vic used to have this drill where sometimes you'd put it on top of the head or just on your shoulder, the racket, and then just have you unwind the shoulders, right? Just to turn in, and then don't reach up until your elbow's gone all the way forward. As far as formulating the loop where you scratch a friend's back with the racket, the centrifugal force brings it around to the edge, on the edge, to the side of you.
Vic Braden, he's, I was working with Vic where, I have to get it right, we're all wearing head clothes, and the next thing you know, he signed with Wilson, or Wilson came out with clothes, so we're wearing Wilson clothes. And so, he's being endorsed by Wilson at the time, and I go, Vic, you're wearing an Izod shirt. But one thing with Vic, it didn't seem like he cared so much about, whether he was, what is the appearance, what type of warm up he was wearing, but he really took pride. And when he signed an autograph for someone, he took his time. It was just amazing how he would do that. But also too, when he
so many great one-liners with his autographs, the little text that he would write with it. He had so many cool things.
Yeah, they did that for the longest time. When you go to his tennis college, you'd have your photo taken.
Yeah.
And it wasn't your photo taken with Vic. Now, Vic was a photographer. He taught Melody. Melody's a photographer too, but he really helped her in that area. And then, one time Vic was taking the photo, and Melody was taking the photo, and Mary Lay was taking the photo. But Vic, yeah, he would sign those and he would say, whoever was the best player at the time, Jimmy knows you're coming,
Yeah, exactly.
with Jimmy Connors, but also too his demos. I remember going out as a young man and doing serve demos, and people said, "Why do you serve that way?" Because just turn and crank it, and it's how the brain's programmed. Because I learned to play where I'm going to beat you with my legs. I'm going to, I was a late starter to tennis, and I just learned through trial and error. Then I started taking lessons in my years as a tennis bum, and I just to this day, and those myths are all back. I mean, it's not like they ever went away. Down together, up together, scratch the back, toss high for more time. But Vic's demos on the serve, he'd just go out there and he would just clock it.
Yeah. The legs, 6 miles per hour. He would say, just by going down and up, it's not a big thing. Same with ground strokes. You talk about, when people say you get all this power from stepping in, well, you step about 2 miles per hour and you get 1.5 times racket speed. So you get a 3 mile an hour shot from a big step.
Yeah.
It's not, it's just how you use the links. It's not a big body movement like that. It's how you coil and uncoil.
I think the chain puller syndrome too. Now kids, do they really know what a chain puller syndrome, or a chain puller when you're riding a bus, pull the chain, let the bus driver know you want to get off.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how so many players, you could look at it this way, where their elbow's down, elbow goes up and down, or the racket points straight up. The racket's not at that salute position where we say the quarterback position.
Yep.
But then for people, as people make a change, it's unfortunate that you have to be so persuasive. And come back to Tom Boulay, it was very flattering for him to say that we have enough credibility to choke a horse. And we were talking about that last night with Clayton Stanley, is that, so many players we've worked with have got to the level where they play college tennis. And it's a very small number, around 3% of junior tennis players will play college tennis. But then who are the marquee players? But that's where the famous coaches are. And the famous coaches, we talked about this experience in Tyler, Texas for a decade throughout the 80s. And they had, at the 2-year college I worked at, they had a great deal of success. I'm not taking anything away from them. They had won a lot of national championships. I mean, the schools from California never played the national championships. They stayed in California. But, they those coaches, they were recruiting players. I know that's a challenge, and hats off to the challenge of being a college coach. But, we're trying to, make players. Like, okay, let's get them to the point where they're going to be recruited. With having a beautiful serve. I think having beautiful strokes. Roger Federer made that list. Vic used to always talk about that. Made a list of all the shots that need to be able to hit. Yep. Right now we're just talking about basic shots, not specialty shots, emergency shots. I think with Vic, the Virginia Wade quote, that's a review for people who are studying our content. Winning tennis doesn't lead to beautiful tennis, but beautiful tennis leads to winning tennis. You can tell right away if someone has an efficient serve. So, now it's October. It won't be long, and it'll be time for the Eddie Herr and the Orange Bowl, and you can just walk around. And so many of these young kids, you never want to take hope away from anyone, but they're hopeful to have a pro career, and they need to do everything in their power to have an efficient serve.
Yep. Efficient strokes.
Yeah, all strokes. Vic used to say that, it's terrible you have to talk about war, but, your serve is a BB gun. No, your serve is a pea shooter. And the other player, his serve's a bazooka gun.
You probably shouldn't go to the net if you're getting hit in the back of the head by your own serve. Right.
If you can read the label on your serve, it's like throwing up a grenade and running underneath it. Yeah. With three things can happen that are positive with your serve. I mean, it's an ace, a service winner, or the returner can hit a minus. And, if you're serving really well, there's 3 players I've worked with that had wins over John Isner. Every set was 7-6. But if you're serving like an Isner, he had a great serve. Not just that he was so tall and obviously a great competitor. You can't take that away from him. He's a top 10 player in the world. But, you win 2 out of 3, you're holding serve. And what a bonus to be able to serve that way.
Yeah.
100 serves a day, Kevin Anderson. You need to find ways to practice, and you can be creative. You can, why don't you talk about the baseball sock?
Yeah, the baseball socks, take a tube sock, put 2 or 3 tennis balls in it, tie a knot. Old baseball trick where you keep the sock continually moving. If you stop your arm, then the sock gives you feedback because it hits you in the back rear of the head even. Also helps keep your palm down. Really, to make that circle over your head, you've got to have your palm down for the most part.
Yeah,
so it's good to shallow swing the sock, then throw the sock. You can try to toss the ball and hit the sock, or hit the ball with the sock.
Vic would always say you have to take a second look too, because people can get to the point where they're setting their hand, they're swinging the sock inefficiently. We have people serve with the sock, throw the sock, jog with the sock, swing the sock right-handed, left-handed. We have one of those ball hoppers that'll hold 300 balls, ball cart, just fill it with socks.
Yeah.
Just fill it with socks.
The Vic used to demonstrate it, and I like to do it as well. So he would just have a sock with his, arm bent behind him, let's say from the cobra position. And then he would just go from there where he would, bend the elbow, salute, and then have the shoulder go forward to create the rest of the swing, and then just stop and reset and do it again. There's a lot of times when you keep the sock moving, players start to set the hand and start to go palm up. They start to raise the elbow up too high, as they start swinging that around. So I think it's good just to have it, just start with the back, turn your body, and then practice making the salute action, and then the shoulders unwinding to make the loop.
Let's talk about, why don't you address separation, lower body, upper body, how you want to, as a righty, turn the left hip into the net post. I think we can also then go to platform and pinpoint. Go ahead.
You said it initially is just to turn. So as you turn first, then you're not going to separate your arms right away. The people who separate their arms right away, you don't have much body rotation, and the toss tends to be more to the left where the speed is not if you're a right-hander. As the body, as you naturally unwind your shoulders, the speed is to the right and in front. So let's say you could say generally 1 o'clock and in front. That's where the racket speed is. So don't scissor or separate your hands too quickly. You want to turn first and then toss. Pinpoint, platform. I remember asking years ago, Vic, about that. And he said, well, pinpoint is an unbalanced position overall. And he talked about baseball pitchers. He's like, I see none doing it. But he said it's a little bit better for going up. And he said the platform was a little bit better for unwinding the links, a little more balanced position. And then the players that, use the reactive brake, stop their upper body, that they would hit a little bit harder. And the players who would let the right foot come through would get to the net faster.
Right.
And I think, these days we're going to see most players are going to really stop that upper body and land on the left foot. Also with the rule change as far as having both feet off of the ground, but more than anything, it's stylistic with the platform and pinpoint. But the pinpoint, obviously, what we talk about is when you bring your foot up, you can turn even more the way like a Shelton or a Sam Groth. Really get that where their front foot actually points to the fence behind them or to the side. They really turn even more.
Sam Groth, you don't hear his name many times anymore. He's retired, but I guess 163 mile an hour serve. But you could look at up on YouTube and you go with Don Leary's word pitcher method, and certainly our influence. We have always said that, Vic Braden is the Christmas tree, and all these other coaches we worked with are the ornaments. He's the cornerstone. But I think, you start mentioning like a Gonzalez, a Sampras, a Federer, who had basically a platform stance where, I could push off with both feet, and there's such an overemphasis of the legs going up and down.
Sampras like dragged his back foot. It was kind of a hybrid almost.
Yeah. Sampras with a tongue out. There was a sports psychologist years ago in Miami who used to tell people, Michael Jordan, Pete Sampras, And it is true that if your tongue's out, your facial muscles are relaxed.
Yeah, you're relaxed.
I saw Tiriac do this one time. You get a player, they have cramps, so you have them lay down, and they close their eyes, and they take their thumb and index finger, and they pull their top lip down. So the theory is if you can relax all the muscles in your face, when people are cramping, their whole face just locks up in excruciating pain. I think with that, I think the breathing. I know you're always emphasizing. Another point is most people don't toss the ball in front. Not only do they toss over their head, but it's behind them, and you have to change the angle of the racket path. The racket slows down.
Yeah, anytime you have an angular change like that, the acceleration goes down. Well, it's funny to hear. I heard a clip with Roddick talking about, the toss being too far in front on somebody or out in front. And it just made me think, well, in our 3D studies in Indian Wells, we had a shot of a serve of Roddick where he made contact 5 feet into the court. That's the upper arm. Like, Hamlin was talking about the upper arm. When the elbow goes forward and up, that's half the racket speed. So you really want to make that link, the upper arm, go 180 degrees.
I like to listen to Roddick. We were talking about how much we like to listen to Agassi, but I heard him recently breaking down Coco Gauff's serve, and he gets out of his lane. That's certainly I've always said that most of us in the GreatBase. I mean, we're not artists, we're not scientists, but craftsmen. This is the craft. This is how you build it. This is why.
The first thing, with that, the toss, I'll just have somebody shadow swing. Just get loose, shadow swing, and just listen to where the swish of the racket is. And it's to the right. If you're right-handed, it's at 1 o'clock and it's in front. So if that's where the racket's going fastest, where do you think you're going to hit the hardest with the ball? Just toss it there. And a lot of times they'll gain 10, 15 miles an hour just from doing that. Just getting the toss in the right spot.
How about the sneak a peek? How about the eyes on the serve?
Yeah, 200 milliseconds or a fifth of a second ahead of the hand. So your eyes, you want to look out to see where your awesome serve is going before you hit. But the minute you start to look out, then really, if your head is moving, then the racket, the energy doesn't transfer to the racket. So you've got that opposing force. Body starts to go to the left while the swing's going up and out to the right if you're right-handed, opposite if you're lefty. But yeah, so the idea, I always show people Ivo Karlovic, he barely used any legs at all, and it has nothing to do with him being tall. Obviously, he's a big guy, and that helps with getting the ball in as far as having a bigger window when you're tall, but he has a great power line. He just uncoils the body, and he stops the links really well. His eyes are right at the hit. Everything's just lined up. So he's just using the body super efficiently. And he's got the swing.
And he follows it up with a forehand and a backhand volley that are just the opposite of what you want to do.
Yeah, if he came to the net, not all the time. Well, he isn't. He had a lot of calculation on his volleys. He really cut the volley.
I remember reading where many times when he'd practice his serve, he'd be on the court for an hour and only hit 15 serves. He'd really be methodical, take his time. And I think I
remember,
go ahead.
Sticking with him, sorry, I remember an article, it was on the ATP website where he said, everybody thinks I have a good serve because I'm tall, but he's like, I have a good serve because I went out and practiced, 250 serves a day or 200 serves a day.
Yeah.
So he just put in the work like everybody else.
I think one thing with serves is Stan Smith, 3 spins, 4 targets, 3 locations on the baseline. 3 times 4 times 3 is 36. Deuce court, ad court. Going out and practicing hitting spots.
Yeah.
With, I remember when Stan Smith and Arthur Ashe came to Kodo to work with Vic. There's a video, you can find it online. And obviously class champions, class acts, and they just kept saying, I didn't know that. I didn't know that.
Yeah. The slice serve, right, where he said literally he thought he peeled the orange or came around. No, Artie, you don't do that. And then the story was that he looked at the film and then went out and apologized to the people and said, sorry, I didn't do what I thought I did. And Vic used to say, that's why his name's on a stadium.
Class act. With, Arthur Ashe, I remember people saying that, he could only play on one tennis court in this facility. He could only play on the middle court because his slice serve would just run you into the wall because he could make the ball break so much.
Yeah.
Okay, the overhead.
I would say one last thing with the serve we didn't talk about with Vic, because he talked about this a lot, was the way you hold the ball. When you have your palm up, your arm is in a tight position. You feel the muscles contract in your bicep. And then that can, with the palm up, the way the wrist joint is, you can flick the ball over your head. So you'd have people hold the ball like a glass of water, or the loosest way, which is to have, the knuckles facing up, or in other words, the palm down. And that's similar to what, Karlovich would do. And then you would convert it to a glass of water towards the end. But there's been a few players that I've filmed that have had tosses that way. That's the loosest way to hold the ball. It's also the weirdest, but like anything, you can learn how to do it efficiently.
Most people, when they have their a righty, when they have their left palm up, the toss goes everywhere. It's going the wrong way. Program your swing. The riddle. Does the racket find the toss, or does the toss find the racket? Program your swing, toss your swing. That's where Bobby Riggs could beat people, because he would play blindfolded when he was serving. I think one thing too, I'll go back to Yvonne on the serve before we go to the overhead, but why don't you talk about the last segment? Maybe we've already covered that, but you got to stay in contact with the ground until the last segment of the serve. Why don't you expand upon it? Yeah,
the longer you can, that whole idea, Gideon, you can't shoot a cannon from a canoe. So if you jump, if you leave the ground too soon, you don't have anything to push off against to unwind your body. You can't push off of air. So you really want to stay on the ground as long as you can. So don't try to jump. Just let the forces pull you off the ground. As you toss the ball out in front, and as you're unwinding, pushing off the ground. But don't really try to jump, because you end up, they used to say, before your forearm reaches maximum speed, or the upper arm, you just don't want to be off the ground too early. But I've seen lots of lessons where people are working on jumping, but that's not where the power is. It's how you coil and uncoil. You go out and serve from your knees, so your knees become the stabilizers to push off the ground and unwind the body. You can serve very hard. Obviously, there's an upward component to the serve that you want, but you want to go around and up, not just up and down.
The nice thing about putting a towel on the court and have the student kneel on the towel, that the body's going to stay at a 45-degree angle.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Or if you're doing a second serve, you can put it even facing more towards the fence.
Yeah. With Tsitsipas, awesome. Actually, one of our followers, a great guy, Costas, was just here, and he grew up with Tsitsipas and was taught out of Braden's book. Tsitsipas serve, he's a righty, and his left foot is facing the opposite net post.
Low elbow, palm up.
Yeah.
Spins out.
Yeah. But yet, what a fighter, what a competitor. The next generation is, pushing him down a little bit, though, as great as he is.
Yep.
With, what do you got, Yvonne, on the serve? What do we forget?
On the serve, well, I could add my own experience. I had a palm up serve. Just trying to copy what I saw Federer doing. Federer has slight regress, palm up, and I tried hard to do that. And came to visit you, Steve, when you were in Orlando. Had had palm up, filmed it. Yeah, I have palm up, all right. And I got the information on the drills and how to change from palm up to palm down, the drills without the racket, toss and catch, just the throw, toss and hit, toss and throw. And then the drills with the sock, the drills with the racket, but progressions. And that's one thing that's, great about the system of systems that we have going. The information is the progressions, from Dennis Vandermeer. It's great. How to build things up slowly. If I can't do something right away, there's some version of that I can do in a minimal amount that I can't do. For example, like I can not have anything in my hand, and I can just pat my shoulder, brush my teeth with my hand. My palm is down. I can't serve palm down right away, but there is a gap between there, and I just creatively, as a coach, or if you're a coach, you can think of a drill that fits in between those two progressions to help the player progress. So, for example, what helped me the most is just throwing the ball. So I had a good idea of, okay, I need to throw the ball like this. My palm stays down, elbow goes forward, forearm pronation. Okay, and I just do it against the wall. I didn't need anybody. And slowly, over time, however many weeks it took me, I developed a palm down serve, and of course it'll feel crummy, but look better. I'm looking at two whiteboards right now with a lot of names on it. So a lot of videos we need to get done. And I'm doing a lot of running and throwing reviews. And it's very rare that I come across a kid who can throw where their palm stays down. And we've had everybody from A to Z, old to young here. And it's sad. It's unfortunate to see where the just before, even if players start palm down, just before they start to uncoil too soon, left arm falls too soon if they're righty, the palm faces up, and the ball just stops. The momentum of the thing that you are throwing goes to nothing. It either stays, it doesn't accelerate, or just completely stop. Your body's in motion, but your ball, the thing you're throwing, is stopped. And then what results in is you're facing forward at the release. It's a wrist release rather than a forearm flick. A wrist flick rather than a forearm thumb down to thumb down snapping action. And even if you do somehow manage to have a thumb down to thumb down snapping action while you're facing your target, that's not very good for your shoulder. Injury prevention. Show you ideally, especially if you're ready, you want your, not especially if you're ready, if you're ready, you want to have your hips and your shoulders face more off to the right side as you release, because your arm, biomechanically releases better as opposed to standing straight ahead. It's very awkward for your shoulder to internally rotate like that if you're facing onto your target. And then players afterwards often over rotate. They're facing off to the left side. Their right leg kicks out for counterbalance. And then you relate it to them and say, hey, this is actually how you serve. And you can bring up their serve and say, you have all the same flaws. And you should be here. Palm should stay down. The path around your head is like a runway for a plane. You need a long runway for the plane to get really fast. And if you go palm up, it shortens the runway. You can't really accelerate as fast. You can't accelerate the ball as fast. And you show top players like Roscoe Tanner, for example, back in the day, or like a Sam Groth that was mentioned, just see the racket accelerate the whole way through their swing. There's no hitch, there's no pause. And so it's just interesting how, throwing motion is related very similar to the serve motion, and all these drills to help correct and prevent it. Like if you ask somebody with a really bad palm up serve, let's say, okay, do this drill where you have 3 serves on the run, or Elvis Presley 2, where you're, turning, and then you want to keep your left hip towards the net, but you snap down and the ball goes into the ground and up. They just can't do the drill. And on one hand, the players don't understand why the drill is important. But as the coach who helps the players with their serve, you say, well, it's important for you to get a palm down serve, and this is why. You go through it: injury prevention, racket head acceleration, you square at the hit. Power line, where you're leaning in at a 45, body segments are out of 45. And what my last comment is with the serve is, it's interesting when you look at the top players. A lot of players like to copy the forehand. They see, again, 95% of the players are similar or pretty much identical at the hit on all shots. But let's say on the forehand especially, they see this horizontal pull, and they're like, okay, That's what I need to do, and that's what they copy. But if they go look at a really good server again, a Sam Groth, even nowadays, anybody, you can't violate physical laws. Even take an Alcaraz who has a hitch in his serve. Take a Zverev who's actually been lowering his toss. A Sinner who changed his serve completely. It's a very good motion. Just look at their serve. You look, if people try and copy their forehands and backhands, look at what are you doing? Look at their serve at the contact. You can see how their forearm pronates. There's no wrist release. There's no wrist snap. You're not breaking your wrist. And it's unfortunate when you go on Instagram, you scroll through a couple Instagram tennis tips, and it goes to, okay, the power comes from the wrist on the serve. And the wrist the wrist is relaxed. You're not forcing it, but it's not a body segment. It's not a link. It's a forearm snap through the ball. Then again, like I circle back to the information, because information is very powerful. You can't think that. You can't just come up with that idea. You got to be told it. You got to be taught it. You got to understand it. But then the players, whether they accept that or not.
Yeah, really good progression, just starting with the throw, right? Vic used to show that where he would have, a little smiley face on the ball or the student's name, and then they would have their palm down in the cobra position and then just bend their elbow. He would say, wiggle the hand, where you just show the name, and that would have your palm down, and then bring the racket into that mirror position, where if your racket were a mirror, you could look up and see yourself in the mirror. And then from there, just have it go between your elbow and your head, and then come around, then the palm would be facing your ear, and then you pronate. Just starting with that simple drill. For me, the serve is not complicated. Putting everything together with the toss, I guess. But if you just program your swing like that, and you can toss through the swing, especially when you realize the toss is not supposed to be 7 feet in the air.
With, I think Dr. Howard Brody. It's always fun to listen to. Vic considered Howard to be, or Dr. Brody to be a mentor. He didn't want you to slow down. Don't stop at zero and start all over again. Just have that swing be slow to fast, continuous motion.
Yeah.
With before we go to the overhead, let me say this with our. I don't want to be pessimistic, but I think we could cover this with our the donated dollars that we have for our nonprofit. We do on our website have a button you can push to donate to our cause to help tennis teaching. But to put this in the kind of maybe not the middle, but towards the end of a podcast, those people let us know if they've listened to every podcast we've ever had, we'll buy them a lottery ticket. I said that one time when you were helping us with a long podcast, and quite a few people. I might have said that at the beginning, though. But a lot of people.
Yeah, that was when I was in Canada.
The honor system where they say, okay, how many people listen to these marathons?
You donate 20% if you win.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Yeah, we still have to come back to that and find a way to. How's it go? One student at a time, but it's not like we're converting people to religion, but the GreatBase is definitely something that's proven to be a proven pathway. How does that sound like?
Yeah.
Need to improve my skills with the
A
language.
little redundant. It's all right. If you build it, they will come.
Yeah. With overheads, it's interesting. Like the word deadline. If you don't get it done, you're dead. With, parents have an overhead. They have so many bills to pay, and I really, take my hat off to parents that are finding a way for their child to have the gift of tennis. But it's amazing that you can watch a match, chart 100 points, and there hasn't been one overhead hit. You go to a junior tournament, and we sound doom and gloom, pessimistic, but it's like, I was at a tournament for 3 days. I didn't see one overhead hit. But if you're playing offensive tennis, right, you're going to hit a lot of overheads. We always say the best player in the 12 and unders is the person who hits the most overheads.
Right.
Go ahead, abbreviated serve.
Yeah, I think one thing that Vic would talk about with the overhead is if your right-handed player is pointing with the left elbow. instead of pointing, because people would point with their finger, but when you do that, you don't rotate the body. So you would say point with the elbow first. We use the left hand on the throat of the racket, which does the same thing, but you would say that, and point with the elbow first. Another, as far as the math, is you would say if you hit up 8 degrees, if the racket's going forward and up 8 degrees, the ball goes 42 feet, so you never miss an overhead. You want to hit up on the ball and not down unless you're right on top of the net.
Yeah, you swing up swing up on more on the overhead than any other shot because you have to counteract the angle of the ball falling.
Yeah.
But most people think they can hit down on overheads, and you've dictated the point. Bill Jacobson, who spent so much time with Vic, if you miss the overhead, you've still dictated the point, and you fall off the horse, you get right back on, and you just go right back up there. With eyes
of the hit. Not sneaking a peek, stopping the body, all the same, things on the serve apply to the overhead.
One thing that's interesting with the serve, and we film players many times, the overhead is the shot they're closest to technically. They don't hit the overhead very well because they don't hit overheads, but they have to respect that ball falling, and so it's like, okay, they're closer perhaps to a technical base on their overhead than on their forehand. And people are like, no, my overhead, I'm afraid of overheads. I never hit overheads. But they have to respect the degree of difficulty of that ball falling.
Yeah.
With the movement for the overhead, so many things from Vic is that the lob is an optical illusion. It looks like it's going much slower than it is because the human eye will play tricks on us. The ball's further away. It's kind of like the airplane floating off in the distance. So coming back to what we talked about earlier, driver lob, and you read that racket face is open, you move back. And, Vic was, a very good athlete, football in the fall, basketball, then tennis. But back in the day, everybody played baseball. And, just like you're in the outfield and you've got to get back. I mean, the crack of the bat, you're moving back. If it's a really good batter, the people in the outfield will move back. Not a very good batter. The guy can't hit the long ball. The outfielders move in. But it's a shot it's not practiced very often. I think, again, back to application and design, we do a drill where, lower level players for sure, we say, okay, lob 4 and 4, lob off your forehand, lob off your backhand. A lot of players can't really hit a underspin lob on the forehand side because they have an extreme grip. So get your hand on 3, base knuckle, heel pad, throw up a high defensive lob. Your opponent partner has to let the ball bounce. Then you play overhead up the middle and you try to counter where you get the ball down at their feet and you can transition.
Hit it.
But start a drill where, okay, we're going to hit overhead just like we're going to hit underspin backhands, I said earlier. With doubles, you should hit so many overheads when you're playing doubles. With confidence is definitely a factor. I love it. Honoring Vic here with this podcast. Confidence comes from winning. Winning comes from skills. Skills come from practice and know-how. And you need to practice your overhead. I tell juniors all the time, find an empty court. Hey, why don't you do it early in the morning? Get out there on a Saturday. And the courts, you own the city if you get up really early. There's empty public courts everywhere. Your partner feeds you 10, and they 10 back and forth, and you hit 100 overheads. That ball goes up and it looks as big as a basketball. I don't talk too much about Bill Cosby anymore, but I have this book and it was all photos. And, he would say that his photo and his facial expressions, kind of like the Canadian Jim Carrey, make people just laugh with facial expressions. And the lob goes up and people would frown. Vic Braden, 14 muscles to smile and 72 to frown. Vic used to always talk about anxiety. People's anxiety level goes up when they go to the net, so they don't even go to the net.
Yeah.
Do a drill where it's a partner drill. Okay, serve, return, volley, lob, play it out. And then it's okay, serve to the backhand, return to the backhand volley to the backhand, lob, and then lob over the backhand side. But yeah, to play aggressive percentage tennis when the point's over, did you honor those two principles? Was it an aggressive point? Was it a percentage point? I think the serve more so than the overhead, just from experience, I'd say that there's more, maybe it's just because you see people hit so many more serves. You don't see people hit many overheads, but it just seems like people definitely shift their head more on the serve than they do the overhead. Again, I think that comes down to honoring that ball falling.
Yeah. It could be. Yeah, the movement, crossover steps.
Yeah,
that'll help you also obviously get back faster, but also keeps you sideways, keeps you turned.
Yeah, we say half the steps to cover twice the distance. And yeah, you've got a coil. You think about a quarterback in football. And years ago, I think every boy, especially, they were at least playing some touch football in the side yard. And but anyway, say in football, you got the linebackers blitzing, and they're not shuffling back; they're crossing their feet over. And then the overhead, when you watch someone throw a football, a short pass, people call it the bullet, the down and out, where the long bomb, the Hail Mary, that's more like the serve. It's a full motion.
Yeah.
Like Dan Marino is known, the Miami quarterback, played at Pittsburgh. They can just rifle that ball, but they turn with both hands on the racket. Vic,
it's a great job to do with the football. Just turn and find that quarterback position, left hand, and then throw.
Yeah, that might be the only thing. We don't really emphasize, like Vic did, point with the elbow.
Yeah.
But it's point with the elbow, and then the left hand goes up. The left hand going up is a secondary movement. The primary movement is to turn. The primary movement is you keep your left hand on the racket. It's going to help you change the grip. It's going to help you loosen the muscles in your right arm for a righty. You can maintain the most efficient angle if you use your left hand longer. And then also you can keep your left hand up longer at the end where it works like a reactive brake. And but basics, I guess for a few minutes we talk about Vic Braden, the man, 10 years.
We've only been on for 3 hours, right? Or where are we at?
Yeah, I think we have to think about
we could
keep our dedicated listeners.
We've covered a little bit.
Yeah, so hopefully it's been a very good review. I'll say one thing about Vic. I know that Ivan wasn't fortunate. Young people today, somebody passed away 10 years ago. How old are you 10 years ago? 15?
Yeah.
Ivan's getting old. He's almost a quarter of a century. But yeah, Vic, he cared about the little guy. He was, I could just tell so many stories. He just, how's it go? You hear this all the time. It's, Vic Braden was a great teacher, but he was a greater human being.
100%. I think I said on one of the podcasts in the past, and Vic, he always made you just want to be a better person when you're around him.
Yeah.
Just the way he treated people, and no matter what, and that helped obviously with the teaching is, like that line, people got to know how much you care, Yeah.
How's it go? They got to know not how much you care, but Chuck Reese says that line all the time.
Yeah. I don't know it off the top of my head.
Do you know that one, Yvonne? Children don't care about how much you know until they know how much you care.
How much you care. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, he wasn't pretentious. He would teach anybody and everybody and really try to understand them, with the brain typing and stuff like that, where he would really try to know how to help them in the best way that they would understand it.
Yeah.
And constantly try to find ways to, okay, like that didn't work. All right, let's try this.
Yeah, I would say that very misinterpreted because he was so funny.
Yeah.
Just so funny. And, yeah, but hopefully our listeners got something out of the podcast. Ivan, you want to go through those notes, or you want to?
Yeah, I can go through notes.
All right.
Let's see if I can get through these 3 hours of notes. Just
3 hours of notes.
just 3 pages. Most of it's just edits and stuff I wrote down, but let me start from the beginning here. Do what's unnatural for 10 years and you'll be great. Interrelationship of strokes and spins is only possible from the ready position. Driver lob, watch the racket. The more complicated the swing, the more time it takes, the further behind the baseline you drift and the less angle you have. From Bud Collins, past the Western grip is known as a Hawaiian grip. Point of a follow-through is that if you're early, you're still good to go. With the way people hit backhand volleys nowadays, you should try and hit your passing shots low into the backhand volley. Palm guidance on the forehand side, knuckle guidance on the backhand side. If you can just make one volley in singles or doubles, your chances of winning the point go way up. Racket hit awareness, face of the racket and the path of the racket. If one changes, the other has to change. I just don't have the feel today. You never had the feel in your life. Drop shot only when you don't need the point. You can see movement, but you can't see forces. Tennis is a lifting game. Common sense isn't common. No spin bounces the lowest, top spin second, and underspin highest with a ball hit at the same trajectory. Approach shot is the money shot, and the volley is the cash-in shot. One thing I didn't know, Andy, thanks for mentioning this, is the alley is 3.3 degrees wide. Imitate before you innovate. Tennis court is an illusion. You see your target straight ahead and through the net. When you start the serve, just turn. Leave your body alone and just turn. The lob is an optical illusion. One thing to add, Steve, you mentioned most people think you can hit down on the overhead. I would argue that they have to hit down on the overhead because most people have palm up. And when you have palm up, you approach the ball with an open racket face. You have to pull down. Yeah, pizza position, pull down, but you want salute position, twist up.
Oh, thanks, Ivan. Thanks, Andy. Thanks, listeners. GreatBase Tennis Podcast. What's this 219? The
218.
218. We've got to keep it going.
Thanks. It was fun to be back on again. Hopefully we'll do it more in the future.
Yeah, thanks, Andy.
Keep giving you guys a hard time.
I thought I gave you a hard time in the beginning. The man who married over his head. The man whose face is good for radio.
And then hopefully we'll be out there in November.
Yeah, come and hang out. That'll be good. It's always good to see Andy Fitzell. 219 in the books. Thanks, Ed. Thanks, everybody. And adios, amigos.
Adios.
Good night.
Bye, boys.
Over and out.
Talk to you.
Yeah.